Fine. Okay. Well, if I could open this meeting, I'd say good morning to everybody. Welcome to the Newport City Council Planning Committee on the 2nd of February 2022. First item on our agenda is apologies. I have two already, one from Councillor Jason Jordan and one from Councillor Richard White. Are there any others, please?
No other apologies, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, it's Councillor Clark. Councillor Spencer has come through me to send his apologies.
So it's Councillor Jason Jordan, Councillor Richard White and Councillor Mark Spencer. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 2, declarations of interest, and I believe there are a few. So if you could note these, Pamela. Thank you. Who wants to go first?
If I may, Pam, I've got an interest for the Baysleg application being a governor on the school.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lacey.
Yes, Chair, it's Councillor John Jones here. I've got the same problem. I've got to declare interest in the same application 4 for Baysleg School.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ferris.
Yes, Chair, I've got to declare an interest in the Old Oak Stave application, long-standing association with the developer's family.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferris. Councillor Forsey.
I'd like to ask for advice from the legal officer as to whether I'm allowed to speak on this item, because on the Old Oak Stave item, because I've spoken on it previously.
Joanne Evans, our legal officer, please. Thank you.
I've looked at the comments in the report that you've made. You've asked for it to come to committee, but you haven't shown anything that is a predetermination this time. So I think you're okay this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you very much. If we move to the next item on our agenda, item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of January 2022 are on pages 3 to 6 of your paperwork. For accuracy first, page 3, page 4, page 5 and page 6. Right, and then would somebody who was in attendance propose that a correct record, please?
True record, Chair.
Thank you. Was that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. All in agreement? Yeah, thank you very much. We move to the next item on your agenda, which is your actual schedule. They cover pages 7 to 126 of your paperwork. Item 1 is on pages 15 to 21. It's application number 21-0905. The site is 14 St John's Road. The ward is Beechwood. The ward members are Councillors Deb Davis, Councillors Mark Spencer and Councillors Graham Berry. Presenting officers is Joanne Davidson, and there is a ward member requesting to speak, Councillor Deb Davis. So if I hand over to Joanne Davidson, please. Thank you, Joanne.
Good morning. Morning. I'll share my screen share.
Thank you.
You should be able to see that, hopefully. So the first application is 14 St John's Road. It's for demolition of an existing WC and change of use from a dwelling house to what we call a small HMO, use class C4. So that's up to 6 people and being resident. The property can be seen on this slide. So that's a photograph of the front elevation. We've outlined the site in red on this Ordnance Survey plan, and we've provided you with an aerial photograph, but I'll go into a little more detail on this because I appreciate this is small scale. So the plans we've been provided with, let me see if I can enlarge these. Okay, so across the top then we've got existing and proposed floor plans. Now the lawful use of the property is a dwelling, but you'll see possibly on these plans that we have multiple bedrooms on the existing plans, and I think we've explained this in the report, that the last use of the property was actually as a HMO, and again I'll go into a little more detail on that as part of this presentation. So what we've got in terms of the proposed ground floor is 2 bedrooms here, front and back, with communal space then towards that, towards the rear of the ground floor. We then have 3 bedrooms on the first floor, beg your pardon. So 1 here under my cursor here, and then a small room at the back, and then 1 proposed in the attic space. The only changes, other than obviously a little bit of demolition work on the back, which is this bit here, hopefully you can see my cursor, so that's being demolished. And the only other change, which we are linking to a recommended condition based on the licensing officer's comments, is the change of this door on the rear to a window as it serves a bedroom or a proposed bedroom. So that's it as far as the elevation and floor plans are concerned. So moving on to the things that we normally see when we get this type of application, and that many of you will be familiar with, and that's the 50-metre radius circle that we draw in accordance with the adopted SPG on HMOs. And this highlighted area, or this highlighted circle, captures actually a total of 18 properties. So that's a correction on the report, which says 19. It captures 18 properties in accordance with the SPG. And you may be able to see on here some green dots. So I'll hover over them on my cursor here and here. They're existing HMOs according to our records. And the actual site is under my cursor now here. So as you can see, if planning permission were to be granted today for this HMO, we would have 3 houses within this radius that would be in HMO use according to our records. That's 3 of 18, so that is 16.6%. Not the 15.8% we've cited in your report. So that's an update. And again, I'll further confirm that in this presentation. So for those who aren't familiar with St John's Road and putting it into context, this aerial image perhaps gives a little bit more detail. So the main road we can see here under my cursor is the main Chepstow Road. And you can see St John's Road coming off here. Again, this is, putting it into context, this is Eveswell Primary School. You've got, I think, just off the top here, Kensington Court Clinic. But notably what we've said here is we've got bus stops to be noted. Under my cursor again, here, here, here. All within 500 feet, 150 metres of the site, and as I mentioned, along with the primary school, but also we've got a range of shops and services along Chepstow Road. So the key policy in the adopted local development plan relevant to our consideration of HMOs, and many of you have seen this before, is policy H8. I won't read it out, it's there, but it sets out the criteria and the main issues that we will consider when we are looking at HMO applications, and I think they're self-explanatory, and we'll go on to those further now in this presentation. So, as you know, we also have the adopted supplementary planning guidance on HMOs that was adopted in 2017. And this is a relevant extract, I think. It sets out, you know, the positive elements of HMO conversions in terms of variety of housing stock. But we also know from past experience and knowledge that HMOs can also cause concerns and adverse effects, and these are set out in these bullet points here. Okay, I can always go back to that slide if you need me to, just let me know in due course. So the key issues then, and again, like I say, we're probably familiar with these now because we've seen these many times before, are in officer view, HMO concentration matters and parking and sustainability issues. So for the purposes of this site, the adopted SPG on HMOs identifies a 10% concentration threshold, not the usual 15% that we have seen on other sites. So the threshold here is actually lower. It's 10%. So granting permission for this site, as I mentioned earlier, this is a slight difference to what's cited in your written report. We'll take the proportion of properties in HMO use within the highlighted area to 16.6%. So clearly above the 10% threshold set out in the adopted SPG. And that needs to be given very careful consideration. Now we know, again from past experience, that to robustly refuse a permission on HMO concentration issues, demonstrable harm must be shown, as previous appeal decisions on sites where the threshold has been exceeded prove that a mere exceedance does not by itself equate to demonstrable harm. And in your written report, we've pointed to a case on Llanthwy Road where we had exactly this issue. And in fact, I think that was about a 23% concentration there. And the inspector confirmed on that one that a mere exceedance does not equate to refusal or a robust refusal. The other primary issue is parking and sustainability. So the lawful dwelling use requires 3 off-road spaces. The proposed 6-bedroom HMO requires 7 off-road spaces in accordance with the adopted SPG on parking. Now, a parking survey has been provided and the Head of City Services has confirmed no objection on parking and highway safety grounds having regard to that survey. Officer-owned site visits have found parking availability during weekdays and evenings that does appear to correlate with survey findings. The site is highly sustainable, and we know from other appeal decisions for HMOs that fact in itself is given substantial weight by inspectors when a parking shortfall exists. So I'll show you some photographs now of the site, and hopefully you can see in the bottom left they're telling you where these photographs are taken. So this is St John's Road, top left, and under my cursor now. This is just a site visit daytime shots. You can see when they were taken. We've given the date at the top of the slide. The application site is the one with this for sale or auction house board outside. So again, top right, this is further up. Because St John's Road is on a bit of a hill, and this is further up St John's Road past the application site. And then we're looking down, down St John's Road, and again on the right hand side we've got a street close by called Bachelor Road. So a few more photographs that we've taken as officers. And again, we've given the date and the time of these photographs on the top of the slide. So again, similar top left, looking up St John's Road. So these are evening shots when we would expect parking to be in higher demand. Top right, again, further along or up St John's Road, and again bottom left, further up St John's Road, and then an adjacent street on the bottom right, Eveswell Park Road. More evening photographs here, again, same date taken to just show you a variety. You can see where they were taken. These are neighbouring streets, not St John's Road, just to give you an idea of how the parking or on-street parking situation is in this area. And then some more, a little bit, a couple of days later, again in the evening. This is St John's Road. The site is actually on the left-hand side. And again, just looking the other way up St John's Road. And you can see from our site visits during the weekday evenings that we've noted there are parking spaces. And whilst I wouldn't say parking was consistently plentiful, nevertheless, parking spaces do arise. So our conclusions then on parking matters, as we know that this is very much an important issue to people interested in this application. You'll note from your written reports that we consulted 70 properties, 70 addresses on this application. We've had 3 objections and parking obviously is a concern. The councillors have also raised this matter. So what we've said here is we appreciate parking is a concern. However, the fact on-street space may not be plentiful at all times has proven to not be a robust reason to refuse planning permission. We've discussed this at previous committee meetings, as many of you will know. You've previously been advised that of all the appeals we've received in response to refusals of planning permission in the last 3 years, all have been allowed. Refusals have related primarily to parking, but some have also related to concentration and character matters. Now, inspectors assume, rightly or wrongly, that car ownership in HMO properties will be lower, and most notably in sustainable locations such as this. And when taking account of recent appeal decisions, the generally positive attitude of the Welsh Inspectorate to HMOs in sustainable locations, irrespective of whether they have off-street parking, along with the parking survey undertaken by the applicant and the lack of objection from the council's highway officer, it is considered that there is sufficient on-street capacity in the area to accommodate the additional demand that the proposed HMO would result in, without significant and demonstrable adverse effect on neighbouring amenity or highway safety for that matter. Now, given the highly sustainable nature of the site, officers recommend that there is no demonstrable harm resulting from the proposals, as I've said, in terms of either highway safety or neighbouring amenity. So, officer conclusions on concentration and character. The proposal will result in a concentration of HMOs in the area greater than the threshold set out in the adopted SPG, as I've confirmed, and this must be considered alongside the merits of the proposal and all other material considerations. Now, we've got no objection from highways or licensing consultees, as you know, and visual inspection of the area does not demonstrate to officers, at least, a visual decline that would suggest the concentration of HMOs is leading to poorly maintained exteriors and front gardens and overall negative impact on the appearance of the street scene. To the contrary, we think the area appears to successfully support a range of housing stock at present. Parking is in high demand. We would agree with that, but officers have concluded no demonstrable adverse impact arising from that matter. So other matters, and I touched on this at the start of the presentation, that I thought committee members should be aware of, and we have picked it up in our report. The property has been previously licensed as a small HMO, and it was occupied as such from 2015 to 2020. And in 2015, occupation of a dwelling by up to 6 unrelated people living as a household in a HMO potentially, or what we would call a HMO now, did not require planning permission. So no enforcement complaints were received by the local planning authority for the duration of that use. And on 25th of February 2016, and the reason you're seeing this application now is that new regulations were introduced that created this new use class C4. So this puts small HMOs into a separate use class to a dwelling. So dwelling remains in use class C3. Now, the effect of this was to enable local planning authorities to control changes of use from dwellings to small HMOs. And a small HMO is a residence of 3 to 6 unrelated people living together as a single household. So the above new regulations could not be applied retrospectively. So I hope that slide is self-explanatory. So we know that the property was previously occupied for 5 years and licensed as a HMO, but when it changed to a small HMO in 2015, it remained, for the purposes of planning, a dwelling. And during the entire time it was occupied, we received no enforcement complaints regarding it. But now that we have the new use class, and now that the property has been vacant since 2020, they do now need to apply for this use. So to conclude then, and as always, I'm happy to take questions. Officers recommend this be granted with the conditions set out in the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Joanne Davidson. Thank you very much. This application has been presented to committee at the request of Councillors Davis and Spencer, and I invite Councillor Deb Davis now to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak, and thank you also to Joanne for the detailed presentation in relation to the application. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have had this called in so I can speak and raise my concerns. My concerns, I think maybe if you look at slide 4 would help to explain the matter. I think what is not taken into consideration, and it's not fair nor reasonable because it's not part of our planning process, is that within that dwelling space, that area, there are houses that have already been converted into flats. So they've already got split level accommodation, and at the bottom right you can see a sort of squared off, it's like it's quite a large two dwellings back to back together. That's actually, I think it's at least 7 flats. It's a large house that's been turned into flats. So already there's a number of properties that have multiple dwelling in them, and there's also properties in there that I know are HMOs. I can see where the green dots are, but I know those properties because I knock on those doors. I know that there is already multiple residents living in those dwellings, although potentially they've not been previously registered. So the numbers are actually greater than the 16.6%, which you refer to, which I know is with the add-on of this property. Well, it was already there anyway. I know that number is greater. Also, that takes into account a 50-metre radius. Now, there are also HMOs on Bachelor Road. There's HMOs on Chepstow Road, and there's equally HMOs on Eveswell Park Road. So that whole area has quite a strong density of intense living, which is not taken into account of in relation to the evidence that has been that the planning officer are able to put forward in front of you this morning. In relation to the parking, I think there is some accuracy in relation to the evening parking. However, what that does not show is that St John's Road, as Joan quite rightly pointed out, is on a hill, and it goes round to Eveswell Park Road, which is on a steeper hill. Cars do not park on those bends. It's not safe to, because those roads are quite narrow on those turns. So actually there are gaps there because residents recognise, and local residents recognise, the lack of safety, and residents on Newport Park Road regularly raise concerns in relation to where they can and can't park because of the safety of that road and how steep it is. And I know that's not a planning decision, but that does explain why you've got those large gaps in parking of the evening. Other than that, it is densely park. There is a dense parking matter, and it is a concern. I would, I talked about the parking density as in relation to it is already over and intense and above, but and I've also explained that there's areas that you can't take into account. What I would be grateful for is that what has been noted is the ground floor windows now being put into that bedroom, because that certainly was a concern of mine at that point in time. My final comment is, and it's a plea really, to be honest with you, is if this is passed by yourselves, it's a plea to the landlord that he takes a responsibility for the property and works well with his tenants to ensure that the property is kept and well maintained and looked after, and ensures that those residents have a good understanding of such things as, for example, our recycling policies in Newport City Council, that they understand their bins and they use it responsibly, and he focuses on getting tenants who want to choose to settle there for a long point in time, rather than that transient nature of resident you so often get from HMO. Make it a property where people feel proud to live, and that's a plea to the landlord, and I hope that's noted. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, we can't hear you.
Apologise. I said thank you, Councillor Davis, for that contribution. Question to Joanne: do you wish to come back in now, or do you wish to wait until the committee have become involved?
I don't think I need to say anything at this stage, Chair, but happy to try and answer some questions.
Okay, thank you. If I move it then and open it to the committee, you could raise your hands. Councillor Forsey is first. Councillor Forsey.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about this 50-metre circle and which properties are captured in that. And it seems to be, from looking at that slide and trying to count up the properties myself, that a property has to be wholly within that 50-metre circle. And there are several properties that are sort of partly captured in it. And although it seems like a firm rule that, if a property is within 50 metres, but in actual fact it's quite woolly really, because it sort of depends on where you centre that circle and how much of the property is captured. Yeah, so there are a number of properties that are sort of partly in that 50-metre circle, and whether you count them or not seems a bit subjective to me.
Clarify that, Joanne, please.
Yes, Chair. Can you see I've put the presentation slide back up? Oh, great. Okay. Okay, so the councillor is right. So in accordance with the supplementary planning guidance on HMO, which guides us on how we do this assessment, we would only, so I think I mentioned we've counted 18 properties, so 18 address points effectively within this circle. And we'll only count the properties whose whole front elevation is within the circle. So the councillor quite rightly points out that there are parts of other properties included, but we won't have counted those in those 18. And it's a difficult one, this, because if we were to, for example, take it out to 60 metres or 70 metres or 100 metres or wider still, the numbers of properties, so the numbers of address points caught in that, will increase as well as the potential number of HMOs it catches. So, you know, where you draw that line in terms of the area it encompasses, you know, the SPG says 50 metres. You know, should it be bigger? Should it be smaller? Who knows? But, you know, from our perspective, we've taken the view as part of the SPG that this is a sound basis. But yes, in answer to the councillor's question, if we look at the top, don't know if I can pull this down a sec. So if we look at this property here under my cursor, that isn't in the 18 properties we've counted because the entire front elevation is not within the radius. And the radius is taken from the front boundary of the site. So under my cursor now, that's where we take it from. So there will be HMOs, as Councillor Davis rightly points out. We can see one at the top here. This one does appear to be a HMO. So there will be HMOs on the fringe or just outside the area. But if we expand the highlighted zone, we also expand the number of properties or address points caught within it. So it doesn't necessarily mean the percentage changes significantly. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. The sort of one of the points I wanted to raise about it was it depends where you centre that circle. If you centre that circle, say a couple of metres to the right or the east as we're looking at it, then you would capture the properties on the sort of bottom right hand side. And then if you move the centre of that circle you know, down a bit, then you would, so when you've got properties that are say 80% captured, it seems a bit unfair in a way to you know, to leave them out, like the one that you've got at the top of the screen there. You've got an HMO, and just by virtue of where you put the centre of your circle, that one is excluded. So it's a bit of subjective operation, I think.
I'm not sure if it's subjective, Councillor, because obviously we draw that line in accordance with the SPG and how it sets out that we should draw it. But you know, there is, I suppose, a potential dialogue to be had in terms of whether the 50 metres, you know, is the right distance to draw. Where you know, whether you should put the centre point slap bang in the middle of the address point, you know, the actual footprint of the house, or the middle of the front garden. But I suppose the basic point is that there has to be a line somewhere if we're going to apply a test of this nature. So what you see in there accords with the SPG as adopted and as it sets the test out right now. And clearly, if there is to be a dialogue about that test, whether it be the extent of the radius or anything else, then that needs to be done, you know, separately as part of a separate discussion over the content of the supplementary planning guidance, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that reply. Councillor Force, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll move then to Councillor Charles Ferris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Joanne, it has been previously listed as a house of multiple occupation, for licensed for, well, was it licensed? Perhaps it didn't need to be licensed, but it was sort of classified for up to 6 residents. Were there 6 residents at this premises previously? Do we know that?
All I know is that it was licensed for up to 6 people. So it was licensed, but of course planning doesn't deal with that. Planning would deal with the, environmental health would deal with that license. We would have been notified back in 2015 of the license. So it would have been for up to 6 people that didn't require planning permission. Now, what was actually occurring, I can't vouch for that, but certainly the license was for up to 6.
Right. And am I right in thinking there's a disabled bay, parking bay outside the property?
Yes, I noticed that. Yes, there is. Yeah.
Slap bang outside the property.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless somebody's disabled, they won't be in the property. They won't be able to park right outside the house.
I assume not. And again, I don't know whether highways can help us on that in terms of what the rules are or what would need to be done to remove that bay. It's not something I can confirm, I'm afraid. But
Right.
the highways officer may be able to assist us on that.
Yeah. Finally, so we're basically, this property puts a concentration, say 1% over the acknowledged guideline.
No, 6.6% over.
Right.
Because the threshold here is 10% in the adopted supplementary planning guidance, and our assessment under the SPG says that if this was allowed, it would go up to 16.6%.
Right. But you do say that the inspectorate are taking the fact it's taken over is not a strong case for refusal.
Well, I mean, it's definitely material. You can't ignore the fact the adopted SPG sets out that threshold for a reason. But what we found based on our appeals experience is that inspectors, just the fact that it's gone over the threshold is not a robust reason for refusal. You have to demonstrate harm, as we do, generally. So unless we can demonstrate harm because of that exceedance of the threshold, then we shouldn't be refusing it because we probably can't defend it successfully.
Right. I see. I wonder if it seems like the inspectorate is shifting the goalposts, what is and what isn't acceptable.
I think they're working on the usual test of demonstrable harm and public interest. So our SPG is very helpful in setting that threshold and giving us something to work against. But having identified an exceedance, we now have to take that next step of saying why that exceedance is harmful.
Right. And pardon me, Chair, but and the sort of objections that the local residents have said, like this makes the area appear scruffy and declining, that wouldn't be sufficiently demonstrable, I suppose, as showing harm.
It would, if we could demonstrate that there was a very noticeable visual decline. So the properties are poorly kept, the front elevations look scruffy, people aren't maintaining the front yards or gardens in this case, there's rubbish accumulating, etc., etc. If we could demonstrate those sorts of issues, and that those sorts of issues were clearly associated with the concentration of HMOs rising, then yes, that could form a basis for refusal. But as we mentioned in our or in my presentation, we as officers didn't feel that there was evidence of visual decline in this part of St John's Road.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Just a point on that, Joanne, if I may. I mean, you mentioned in the presentation that from 2015 to 2020, it was that the property was an HMO, so it was occupied. Have we got a record of any complaints from residents about the occupiers' behaviour during that 5-year period? Or is that a how long is a piece of string question?
Planning has no record of any enforcement complaints coming to us. So over that period, no one has come to us to make a complaint about an unauthorised use. Licensing haven't raised any issues with this application. They've raised no objection, bearing in mind they have a record of a previous licence on the property. Although we have tried to acquire comments from the police on this application, unfortunately we've received no response. So we've got no information that would suggest it was previously a problem, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Councillor John Guy, please.
Yeah, you've already sort of touched on what I'm going to say, Councillor Davis, yourself and Joanne, really, but what I'm concerned about is management. Management is obviously in any organisation, you've got to have good management to ensure something runs properly. The question being is, have we got any way in which we can manage the situation as to the way in which this particular property or similar properties are run properly? I know you've sort of touched on it, but is there, excuse me, is there any strong way in which we can ensure these places are managed properly?
Joanne?
I think we're probably straying there outside our regulatory remit. So as a planning authority, I would say no, but we do know that there is effective regulatory process through licensing, which comes under the Environmental Health Service area, whereby issues such as poor records of landlords, generally, poor maintenance or, of properties, that would come under the licensing banner. It wouldn't come under planning, and we shouldn't try to duplicate controls that are better dealt with by other regulatory bodies.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the what you said there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor James Clark, you're indicating.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to sum up in my own head this decision, because obviously sort of being on planning for a while, this isn't the first HMO in front of us, and it's always a very difficult decision. But Jan, if you can just maybe, if I've got this correct, at the moment, when you started, it was the 6.6% over the 10%, which is sort of, straight away you think, well, that's not a great start. But as I said, there is history, etc., of maybe other examples. So then again, using your word, which is right, is that robust enough on its own? So then you then look at, I'm then trying to look at the evidence through that to maybe find something which will join with that. But the evidence which we've seen is the parking seems to be reasonable. 3 objections out of 70. There doesn't seem to be, as much as we can know, any huge complaints on the property. It has been a HMO. So where I'm struggling on this is, in my mind, is the headline figure, the 16.6. But beyond that, everything seems to sort of be okay as such. Would that be a fair assessment, or have I got it completely wrong?
No, that's right, Councillor. You're summing up what we think, and this difficulty, if you want to call it that, of demonstrating harm. And we, it's not like we haven't tried on other sites. We've reported this to you before. We do refuse HMOs. We have refused HMOs, both on concentration matters and or parking matters. We actually have several cases not a million miles from this site where we've tested them at appeal, predominantly on parking issues, I would say. So we've got one not too far on Chepstow Road. I think we've mentioned that in our report. And we've also had one further up the hill on Eveswell Park Road that we've tested at appeal and we have lost. And some of those cases we were actually quite confident about as officers on parking grounds for the reasons Councillor Davis has identified. So but nevertheless we lost. We know the sort of weight inspectors give to sustainability, and this is sustainable in terms of the parking issue. And if we look at the concentration issue, we know from sites elsewhere that unless we can add issues of visual decline, issues of antisocial behaviour or criminal issues potentially raised by the police, or other issues that we could directly attribute to this increasing concentration of HMOs harming character and amenity, then unless we've got that, then we will struggle to robustly defend a refusal, in my opinion.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you both. Councillor Trevor Watkins, you're indicating, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Joanne, a number of concerns. Parking is one, as Councillor Deb Davis has said. You don't mention how much of St John's Road is restricted in regards to parking, double yellow lines, disabled and so on. You don't mention that. We could have parking spaces there of, 20, 30 yards each time, and then find out that they've been all double yellow lines, so it can't be taken into consideration. So I'm concerned about that. Councillor Forsey mentioned the area 50 metres. I think the area which we use and calculate needs to be reformed, because the people at the rear of the property, obviously they can use the gardening at the rear, but it doesn't capture any of the properties at the rear of St John's Road. Also, you mentioned about bus stops. I don't think that's relevant, because the majority of the times the buses don't run suitable for people in HMOs, because they're normally working shifts or long hours, and obviously if they're working 6 till 2 or 2 till 10 or even 12-hour shifts as a nurse or somebody at the hospital, they can't get public transport to and from. So that argument I don't think stands. The other one is the 10% and 16%. I'm a bit concerned about that. I think that needs to be looked at. The other thing is the comments by some of the neighbours. If you go to page 17, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth bullet point down, and it says the house is currently let to rooms, and although quite now there have been some, whatever that word is, goings on in the past, including open drug dealing, large parties in lockdown. Who monitors this? And absentee landlords. So I'm a bit concerned that you say that you've had no complaints, yet this objector seems to think there has been complaints somewhere. So I'm on the fence with this one. I'm a bit concerned. I do understand what you say about the inspector, but I think as Newport City Council, we need to review this in the future. In regards to where you mark the centre of the circle, I think it should be 25 metres from the boundary fence on each side. But obviously at the moment it's 50 metres in total. Okay, thank you, Chair. Those are my concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you. Joanne, do you want to answer some or all of those? Or?
I think I've probably dealt with some of those, and I'm not sure that I would say any more. The only point was the first point Councillor Watkins raised about the parking, and just to clarify that the parking survey would account for areas where you can't park, so that would include double yellow lines, areas outside access, existing access ways, certain areas around junctions. So the parking survey would not have counted those areas in the length of available on-street potential parking. Just wanted to clarify that. That's all part of the parking survey requirements. Over and above that, Chair, I'm not sure there's anything else I need to add at this stage.
Chair, but we're not sure what that percentage is of restricted parking on St John's Road. We could, let's say, for instance, 100% of the road and only 50% you're able to park. You know, so that's what I'm concerned about, or 50% you're not allowed to park. So this is what concerns me, as one of the comments were made in the objections in regards to, in some cases, this resident is unable to get out of his drive because of people parking across it, and also not being able to get into his drive. So this is really what concerns me. You know, we need to review this situation, I think. Thank you, Joanne.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Charles Ferris.
Thank you, Chair. Joanne, we haven't had much luck really with the cases where we refuse. We seem to have lost to the appeals. Is, apart from the increased occupation of officer time, is there any penalty that the authority has got to pay when it loses appeals?
Thankfully, we don't get served with costs awards very often, because whilst an inspector may not agree with us, we've often made the decision in a reasonable way and fairly. The only case I can think of in relation to HMO was a couple of years ago, and I can't remember the exact details, but we have had one cost award against us that I can think of that related to a HMO decision. But the vast majority, thankfully, don't result in costs being awarded against us.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Councillor Ferris. Right, is the committee prepared to move to a recommendation or a decision, please? There's no one else indicating they wish to speak. Just to remind you that the recommendation is that we grant this application with conditions. Councillor Guy.
Yeah, Chair, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendations with their conditions.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there someone prepared to second that, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Pamela, can we move to the vote, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
Yeah, I accept the officer's recommendations and conditions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I'm for the officer's recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Watkins?
For the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris?
Yeah, for the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Lacey?
Against the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Forsey?
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Jones?
For the recommendations.
And finally yourself, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation.
That's 1 against and 7 for the officer's recommendations, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you all for your contributions. We now move to item 2 on your agenda, which is on pages 22 to 63. It's application number 21-0988. The site is plot 1 and plot 5 Imperial Way. The ward is Marshfield. The ward members are Councillor Richard White and Councillor Tom Suller. The presenting officer is Grant Hawkins. There is a public speaker, Mr. Nigel Williams. And if I could ask Grant Hawkins, please, to present the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just share my screen now. Can we all see my full screen there, please, Chair?
Yes, indeed.
Brilliant. Okay, so this application at plot 1 and plot 5 Imperial Park, sorry, on Celtic Way. The site is outlined in blue here. So the application is for the construction of a 2-storey manufacturing and research development facility, four-storey administration office linked with a linked atrium space, external storage of nitrogen and oxygen, car parking, sustainable drainage, hard and soft landscaping, access gates and associated works. So the recommendation, it's a little bit of a long one, I'm afraid, so I'll read it out and then I'll just break down what that means, but I will touch upon this as we go through the presentation. So it's we're requesting delegated authority to be given to the Head of Regeneration, Investment and Housing to issue a decision to grant planning permission with conditions. Firstly, subject to a Section 106 legal agreement, also with delegated authority to refuse the application if we if we fail to agree that legal agreement with the applicant, and on receipt of no objection from Natural Resources Wales. So I will touch upon that. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but effectively what we're recommending is that planning permission is granted, subject to a legal agreement for active travel improvements for the site, contribution, sorry, and then on receipt of no objection from Natural Resources Wales, who are due to come back to us with final comments in the coming days. As I said, I'll touch upon that as we move through the presentation. So this is the aerial view of the site. So this is the Imperial Park Industrial Estate. The site is outlined in red as per the dotted line here. Plot 1 is the main focus for the development, which is highlighted here. And plot 5 is a smaller area which is just over North Lake Drive to the east of plot 1. So they're referred to as plot 1 and plot 5 for the purposes of the report and presentation. The wider area is an industrial park. Committee are more than likely to be familiar with this area. They have recently approved planning permission for a new data centre on this plot here last year. That's currently under construction, as we'll see through some of the photos from site. There's also the existing data centre to the north here, with permission also approved for other works in relation to the data centres around here. We're to the southeast of the A48. Further north is the M4. Again, existing industrial uses to the east of the site, with residential to the southeast and southwest and northeast here. So if we just run through the designations and constraints of the site, it is located within the urban boundary. It is previously developed land. The site is located within the local development plan for employment use. It's within parking 5 of the council's parking standards, parking zone 5, sorry. To the south of plot 5 is a site of importance for nature conservation. If I just maybe just go back up, that's just to the south of plot 5 here. And then the site of importance nature conservation beyond the highway to the south of the site, sorry, which is further down here, so to the south of Dufferin Way, which splits the site in that area. 30 metres to the south of the site is an archaeologically sensitive area. Beyond that is the Wentlug special levels special landscape area, approximately 360 metres south. The Gwent levels is approximately 350 metres to the south of the site as well. And the nearest residential properties, as I pointed out earlier on the aerial plan, are 300 metres to the southeast and 400 metres to the northeast. So there's some site photos here just to give you sort of an indication as to the context of the site and its existing state. So it's previously been used as a car parking area in conjunction with some of the other industrial uses within the wider area. So this is a view looking towards the IQE building, which is directed to the north of the application site. Views east across the site in the direction of where the approved data centre building is, which is currently under construction. This area will generally be where the sort of proposed parking is for the development. As we look south along Celtic Way, there's the existing data centre building here and the IQE building here. The final picture, final photograph, shows views west across the site. So the location of the proposed building will approximately be where my cursor is here. The key considerations for the application. First of all, the principle of the development. As I mentioned, it's previously developed land, it's within the urban boundary, and it is designated for employment use and allocated within the local development plan. So in terms of the principle of development, we feel that it's pretty sound and it's acceptable in principle, subject to the relevant material planning considerations. The social and economic impact of the proposal, the design of the building, visual impact on the surrounding landscape and proposed mitigation measures, impacts on ecology, trees, highway safety and parking, active travel considerations, of which I mentioned there is a financial contribution which we'll touch on later in the presentation, impact on residential amenity, air quality, drainage and flooding, and heritage impact and archaeology. So those are the key considerations that we'll be going through within this presentation and have been considered within the officer's report. So this is the proposed site layout. So broadly speaking, it's 4.2 hectares in size. The site originally, as submitted, was larger. It extended further east into plot 5. However, that has been reduced for a couple of reasons, and the final layout that we're considering as part of the application is the layout of plot 1 and a small section of plot 5, which includes an attenuation pond and footway. So the building footprint is here. I'll run through the elevations and dimensions in a moment, but to the south, the front facing elevation is the primary front of house elevation. This is the 4-storey office and administration building. To the rear is the 2-storey manufacturing and research and development facility. Car parking is located to the south of the main building. There are 408 spaces proposed. The service yard is located to the north, to the rear of the building, where service vehicles will access off Celtic Way and egress onto North Lake Drive. The proposed access and exit for the car park is located off Celtic Way also. So I just wanted to touch a little bit upon SPTS Technologies Limited, who are the applicant. So this would be their new headquarters. They currently operate from a site at Ringland Way, which is just off the M4 motorway at the Caldra roundabout. So SPTS design, manufacture and sell semiconductor capital equipment, which provides the solutions needed to deliver the next generation of technologies for the semiconductor and microelectronics industry. It's a very highly technical process. So yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, they design and develop, manufacture and sell technology for microchips and semiconductor units, which will go into your everyday technologies, your mobile phones, your sort of your iPads and technologies like that. So it's an evolving business based on the fact that we're reliant on technology in everyday life moving forward. The business were recognised by the Queen, having received the Queen's Award for Enterprise and International Trade across 3 years, and for innovation in another 2 years. The company being recognised by Welsh Government for their contribution in increasing jobs and growing the economy within Wales, and they've been given anchor company status. SPTS currently employ 360 members of staff at the existing Newport site. They employ 590 across Europe and the wider area. But owing to the projection of growth for the business, they're set to outgrow the existing site at Ringland Way by the middle of 2023. The company have had no redundancies in the last 12 years and have had 11 years of consecutive growth. And in 2020, the average salary for their workers in Wales were just over £43,000. So The proposal, as I mentioned, it's a 4-storey administration building and 2-storey manufacturing and research and development facility. It will condense the existing Ringland Way site and the off-site storage facility onto one site approximately 50% bigger. So their operations currently take place at Ringland Way. However, there is storage of materials, etc., located elsewhere in Newport, approximately 4 miles away. So the proposal would combine everything onto one site. So there's, no requirements for cross-city movement for deliveries between the 2 sites. The site will initially accommodate 450 staff, which is an addition of 90 jobs from their current employment at the existing site. But phase 1, which is what we're considering today, has been designed to accommodate a growth to 650 members of staff over the next few years. That's based on the company's future growth projections. Around the site will be land which is owned by the applicant, Spts. They're currently purchasing the site from Marsh Government and land around it. There are intentions in the future that they'd like to expand onto this land, which with the possibility of creating a European hub for the KLA Corporation, which is the parent company of Spts. So potentially by approving this application, there is further growth opportunities within the immediate and adjacent sites for expansion and further job creation. A study from Cardiff University in 2019 forecasts that 3.2 jobs will be created within the supply chain for every 1 SPTS job. The target is to have the initial build complete by October 2023, but the timescales are very tight for that, so it may go on a little bit. In order to achieve the funding for the project, the building will need to achieve BREEAM Excellence, which is a green rating, by incorporating sustainable provisions. A very simple example would be the inclusion of solar panels. It's not something that is strictly material planning consideration, but it just goes to show the company's commitment to trying to create a green and sustainable project and the requirements they need, obviously, to unlock that funding. So the top image here is the south-facing elevation. So this is the office building, the front of house. So the main bulk of the building across here will be 17 meters in height. However, there's 2 endpoints which go up an extra 4 meters to 21 meters. I believe these are sort of to access roof space, for example. The overall width of the 4-storey structure is 93 meters. This is the elevation from the north, looking at the rear elevation. The overall rear elevation is 135 meters, so it is wider than that 4-storey front elevation, but this is only at 2 stories in height. The side facing elevation, so this is as you look at the east facing side elevation from North Lake Drive. Again, you can see the 2-storey building goes up to 13 meters with a maximum height of 17 meters, and this is looking from Celtic Way. So again, you've got the front of house office operation at 4 stories, sorry, and the manufacturing at 2 stories. So the design brief was to create a bold architectural statement. The 2 mass forms of the manufacturing and administrative buildings differentiated by the contrast of materials. The front of house administration block, which I'll just show you here. I'll show you some computer generated images now, because I appreciate these elevations is quite a lot of detail that might not be that clear. But the front of house administration block is made up of powder coated or anodized finished metal sheet cladding panels to give a contemporary modern appearance, with a semi-matte black perforated rain screen panels and brise soleil throughout the front elevation. The rear elevation is more of a dark grey matte or matte black cladding, which is a little bit more simple, a bit more industrial in its appearance, given that it does represent the manufacturing processes which will undertake to the rear. So it's a highly technological business, and the proposal and the processes are taking place within the building, and the team wanted a design to effectively match that nice contemporary looking building. So here are some computer generated images as we look across the site to the front elevation. This is the south facing administration block. You can see the lower scale, darker manufacturing building to the rear. This is as you look square onto the south elevation from the car park. the main access point is here. This is a recessed gap within the front elevation. This is looking to the rear of the building, to the side of the manufacturing part. As you can see, there's a canopy here where service vehicles will access and reverse into the service yard, unload and load at the rear. There's some indicative images here of the interior of the building. Just thought might give some context for what the building may look like inside. This sort of open atrium space, high level office space, lower level office space. As you can see here, sort of the lobby area. At ground floor, there'll be canteen, cafe, meeting rooms, a general lobby and reception. First floor and above at the front will be predominantly office blocks and meeting rooms. And then, as you see here, this is taken from Celtic Way, the front of the building, administration block, manufacturing block, and into other industrial buildings located along Celtic Way. So I'm not going to go through all of the 4 floor plans because the detail is quite well, it's quite difficult to show you the exact layouts given the size of the plans, but effectively what we've got at the front 4-storey element here is predominantly open and mixed office use space with meeting rooms, boardrooms, for example, staff welfare facilities and stair routes, along with areas for ducting from the lower ground areas. To the rear, we've got manufacturing space, as you can see in yellow and red. The pinky purple area here is a clean room. So given the nature of the microprocessors and the technology which has been produced here, they require a clean room to make sure there's no contamination of the product. So this is where I would anticipate you'd expect to see, you know, people sort of in bodysuits to make sure that nothing gets contaminated during the manufacturing and research and development process. So if we move on to neighbouring amenity, as I mentioned, the sites here, you've got residential properties over here and here, intervening landscaping areas, existing industrial uses, highways, approximately 300 metres and 400 metres respectively. So we don't anticipate there's going to be any adverse impact on residential amenity given the significant separation distances and intervening uses and vegetations. We've had no objection from environmental health either. There are some conditions that we'll be proposing to protect residential amenity. There will be planting equipment set in within the roof behind the walls on the roof. Prior to the installation of those, we'd like a noise assessment to see whether there's any mitigation required to quiet that plant equipment. The construction environmental management plan will control working hours in line with the working hours of the other construction developments within the vicinity of the site which are currently underway, and also to protect measures such as dust, noise, vibration, so fairly standard things that you'd expect within a camp. There isn't any piling works proposed for the foundations of the building. However, we have put a restriction on the hours of any piling work just in case that does change, in order to protect residential amenity. The lighting of the site is not anticipated to cause any wider issues for residents given the significant separation distances and intervening buildings and vegetation. But again, we want to see a final external lighting scheme via condition. We've also put a condition on restricting the use class of the building, specifically to what they're applying for, i.e. the manufacturing of the semiconductor equipment and the associated office space, just in case, you know, the building changed hands and there were issues raised over and above what had been considered within this application. So moving on to ecology, this is an extract of the Habitats Assessment Plan. So this has been set out. The Habitats Assessment takes into account all of the land which is to be purchased by the applicant. So the site red line, it's a little bit confusing, but doesn't include all of this. It just includes the smaller section around here and plot 5. But obviously it gives an indication as to sensitive ecological receptors. So we've got various bare ground, scrub which is developed from the site being left, hedges and ecological features which may be suitable for ecological habitats. This is the photo of the site as of this month. So we're stood on Dufferin Lane to the south of the site, looking across plot 5 here. The site has been cleared. The landowner undertakes maintenance of the site, and this was cleared either towards the end of last year or earlier in January. As you can see over here, this is the data centre which was recently approved to the northeast of the site, which is currently under construction. So the application originally included a preliminary ecological appraisal of the site, including that habitats plan that I just mentioned. The Council's ecologist and Natural Resources Wales requested updated surveys and reports in relation to ecological interests to make sure that we have a full understanding of what the impacts might be, what mitigation, compensation, enhancement measures will be applicable. Consequently, the site was reduced on plot 5. An area of woodland has been retained, which acts as a buffer between the site and the sink, which is the pond to the south of plot 5. So we consider that to be a merit. The following list of information was submitted with the resubmission of the ecological information. So effectively, these reports and surveys all fed in to the ecological impact assessment and the updated soft landscaping plan. So the ECIA, as I just mentioned, has been submitted to understand what ecological features are on site, to make sure that we've granted planning permission in accordance with relevant policies, and to understand exactly what mitigation, compensation and enhancement can be secured. So as part of the ECIA report, a number of measures for compensation, enhancement and mitigation have been provided, as listed here. I won't go through each and every one, but that's been proposed as being sufficient by the project ecologist. I'll just show you the landscape plan, which shows open mosaic areas in this colour here around the site to replace what's being lost, areas of planting trees and hedgerow within the site, planting wildflowers, etc. around the boundaries, and further planting to the northeast here, along with tree planting, scrub and wildflower mix around the Attenuation pond. This table has been taken from that landscaping plan, which shows a breakdown of the square meterage of each of the proposed planting types. So that gives us a clear indication of how much has been replaced in terms of mitigation, compensation and enhancement. So the Council's ecologist has reviewed the submitted information that was submitted in January, and they generally support the mitigation, compensation and enhancement which is set out in the ECIA. However, what they have raised is that there should be stronger links between that report and the landscaping plan. That should be in the form of diagrams, to make sure that we know exactly what we're getting on the plan, where we're getting it and how that report translates spatially onto the landscaping plan. It's been discussed with the ecology officer that could be secured via conditional discharge, so we can secure those details via condition. With regards to Natural Resources Wales, they have been reconsulted on this information, but owing to the time that it came, the date that it came in, their 21 days, which is the statutory period for them to respond, doesn't expire until later on this week. So at this stage, we haven't had a final response from Natural Resources Wales, which is why we're requesting delegated authority from the committee for the application to be approved, and delegated powers on the basis that we don't get an objection from Natural Resources Wales. So Natural Resources Wales have stated in their initial response that great crested newts, bats, otters, dormice and their breeding sites and resting places are protected under the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. The submitted reports and surveys have been undertaken. They've showed that there were no dormouse recorded on the site. The site has also been cleared, so any potential for dormice is no longer sort of in situ on plot 5. The Habitat Suitability Index survey, which is undertaken, showed that there were no great crested newts within 500 metres of the site, but there was some evidence of water voles to the south of plot 5 within that sink area, or falls outside of the site but within proximity of the site. As I mentioned, the Council's ecologist considers that whilst he supports the proposed measures, has confirmed that Natural Resources Wales could obviously could take a different view to him, so he has caveated that. If a licence is required in relation to any of those protected species, then there are 3 criteria that the local planning authority would have to consider before granting planning permission. So these 3 criteria, which are set out here, would need to be justified in order for a licence to be given by Natural Resources Wales. The local authority would have to be reasonably confident that a licence would be approved in order to grant planning permission. So, in our view, given the ecological information that has been submitted, given the significant economic and social benefits of the scheme, the proposed mitigation, enhancement and compensation measures proposed, we're reasonably confident that NRW would satisfy a licence based on the information that we have. Obviously, that we're awaiting Natural Resources Wales' final response in relation to that, hence the delegated authority that we're seeking. So that's ecology. Oh, one more slide, sorry. Yeah, I think I've just summarised in there what I've just mentioned. So if we do get an objection from Natural Resources Wales in relation to the ecological matters, we will try and resolve that between the applicant and Natural Resources Wales if there's minor amendments or tweaks that can be made. But in the event NRW do maintain their objection and we cannot come to a satisfactory agreement, then we would have to bring the application back to be determined by the planning committee. So moving on to the landscaping and visual impact for the scheme. As I mentioned, the site's located into plot 1 and plot 5. So plot 1 is where most of the built development will be. The landscape officer has raised no objections to the proposed building in principle, but has raised concerns about the external proposals, the layout of the site and its landscaping and the overall materiality of the site. So a landscape visual impact assessment was initially submitted with the application when it was submitted back last year. However, the landscape officer does not feel that this adequately addressed the overall impacts of the proposal, particularly at a more localised level within the industrial estate or on the publicly visible spaces around the site. It was therefore requested that a new visual impact assessment was submitted. However, this hasn't been received. So an assessment has been made based on the information that has been submitted and is before the local planning authority. And I've also taken out site visits from the various viewpoints that have been outlined as required by the landscape officer. So these viewpoints from the wider area were requested from the Wales Coastal Path, Footpath near St Mary's Church in Marshfield, which is a listed grade 2 listed building, and the Northwest Residential Development. So this photograph here was taken by myself from the Wales Coastal Path. It's approximately 3 kilometres from the site. This blue dot here is where I was stood when I took the photograph. The direction of the photograph is towards the site over here. Now you may or may not be able to see, depending on the size of your screens, just above my red cursor there's a white, top of a white building which you can see. That is one of the existing buildings on site. Now that existing building has a maximum height of 24.5 metres. The proposed building as part of this application would broadly be located to the south of that site, sort of in front of that site, and will go up to a maximum height of 21 metres. So it is a few metres lower than the highest point of the building that you can see there. So there may be views visible from the Wales Coastal Path, but given the 3 kilometre separation distance, given the scale of the proposal and the existing buildings on site, I would consider, officers consider, that there isn't any significant impact or adverse impact on visual amenity or the landscape from the Wales Coast Path. Moving on to the public footpath near St Mary's Church in Marshfield. So again, the photograph was taken from this blue point here and an approximate 2.5 kilometre distance across the landscape looking towards the Celtic Way Imperial Park Industrial Estate. Walking along this public right of way, I was unable to see any views of the site. Within the existing backdrop, you may be able to see there's a wind farm. There's wind turbines much further beyond the site, towards the docks, I think, but nothing I could significantly see within that landscape area from there. And then finally, the residential properties at Edmondsbury Road, which is to the northwest of the site over here. Properties back on here. There is dense woodland, an existing building. The new data centre building is being currently built here, and our site is over here. So there's not considered to be any significant views or harmful impact on visual amenity from these neighbouring residential developments. So I'm going to run through a couple of images from closer viewpoints within the estate. So this is a computer-generated image from the visual impact assessment that was submitted originally with the application. So this building here is the most recently approved data centre, which was approved last year by the planning committee. This photo shows a rough real-life photograph from this month, with this building currently being underway. It will go to a height of 20.6 metres, so a very similar height to the highest point of the proposed building. The proposed building within this application will form through this gap here. So it just gives you a context of the existing industrial units that the site will be located in between. So this is a CGI image taken from the south of the site along Dufferin Lane. Shows the anticipated viewpoint of the building here, the administration block with the lower manufacturing units behind. Just over here you can see that data centre building which has been approved and under construction. And again, this is a photograph taken from Dufferin Lane this month. This is the existing IQE building, which the proposed site is just to the south of. Then you've got the under construction data centre over here. So just to give you a visual context of the site, the concerns from the landscape officer with regards to the immediate visual impact is that the proposed planting scheme along these boundaries, along the southern boundary and around, is quite low-lying vegetation. There are some trees, but perhaps they're not structural trees, so they may not do an awful lot to screen what is quite a big building from the immediate highways and public walking ways. Officers, there's no reason based on the landscape plan put forward that more structural planting and better screening couldn't be achieved on site around the perimeters. So we are suggesting that a condition is applied to the conditional regime, which requires further details of landscaping, soft landscaping for the site and the hard landscaping of the site. So we're confident that we could achieve something on the perimeters which is perhaps better than what's initially been suggested within the landscape details. This is looking from the top of Celtic Way, so from the north of Celtic Way down towards the application site. The building will be somewhere around my cursor here. The existing IQE building is here and the existing data centre is here. Again, this is a computer generated image which shows these two buildings and then the manufacturing building and administrative office building to the south of the existing IQE building. So sort of to summarise, I suppose, the site does face the sensitive landscape to the south, which is the Wentlow Levels Special Landscape Area. It is located within an existing industrial estate and amongst other buildings of similar scales. For example, the original data centre building is 200 metres wide by 105 metres in width, at a height ranging between 22.25 and 24.5 metres. The recently approved data centre to the northeast is 142 by 100 metres to a height of 20.6 metres. Our building is 135 metres total width, a maximum height of 21 metres, but the main bulk of the building will have a maximum height of 17 metres at the front and 13 metres to the rear. And the depth is, I think it's about 80 metres. So again, the landscape officer has no objections in principle to the building, but there are concerns with the visual impact on the immediate surrounding area, which we think can suitably be secured via conditional discharge. Moving on to highway safety and parking. So owing to the scale of the development being a major planning application and owing to the size of the building and footprint, a transport assessment was submitted with the application. This has been submitted along with TRIX data for comparable uses, as well as data from the existing SPTS site at Ringland Way. The council's highways officer have reviewed and is satisfied that the traffic impact on the surrounding area will not be significant. A stage 1 safety audit was carried out and designer's response has been submitted, which raised some issues with regards to some of the access points, for example. However, this was prior to the site layout being amended throughout the course of the application. Some of the issues were in relation to the access and egress point at plot 5. However, this has been excluded from the consideration of this application. This resulted in a number of the issues falling away. The remaining issues, such as amended visibility displays, were addressed by the applicant and their transport consultant and resubmitted. Highways have confirmed that any works within the highway would need to take place underneath within the relevant highways agreement, so a section 111 or section 278 for works within the highways, and these would also require stage 2 safety audits to be undertaken. However, these are separate processes from planning approval. So if we move on to parking, the first table there shows the parking requirements for the proposed uses of the building in accordance with the SPG. The second table takes those uses, compares that with the parking requirements, the relevant floor area of that section of the building, and then creates the total number of spaces for each breakdown. So the total number of required parking spaces based on the SPG is 390 parking spaces. This is a snapshot of the site layout, which focuses on the parking area to the south of the main building. Overall, there are 408 parking spaces proposed, which is a 5% surplus to the SPG. However, this is considered to be acceptable in this instance, given that there could be some fluctuations in demand for parking based on visitors, for example, or anything else. 5% of these parking spaces would be disabled bays, and you can see these located directly to the south of the building. 10% will be installed with electrical vehicle charging points, as you can see in blue. That's in line with national planning policy. And 5% will be car share bays, as you can see in that orangey pink colour over here. The remainder of the spaces will be free to use parking spaces by any member of staff or visitor. So, staying on the same subject, but moving on to active travel. A travel plan was submitted with the application. This is a statutory requirement for any major planning application. That includes measures to be incorporated at the site. So in terms of cycle storage, it's been calculated based on 350 members of staff working at one shift at a time. 88 cycle spaces that are secured would need to be provided, along with 18 open short-term spaces. The site plan shows where these would be located, shows the location of the secured cycle storage, and a condition is recommended to agree the specific design and visual appearance of that. Also, for this application, it was requested that the applicant makes a financial contribution, which is secured by Section 106 legal agreement, for the provision of a new cycle and a pedestrian route serving development. I'll move on to the next slide now, but they've agreed to pay a contribution of £50,000. The works would be undertaken by the council's projects team prior to the occupation of the building, which is in approximately 3 years' time. So the reason for this is the site is located here, along Celtic Way here, as identified in yellow. There is no pedestrian footpath either side. It is highway verge. So there is no safe route to encourage active travel or sustainable modes of pedestrian access to the site from Celtic Way, because this footway terminates at the access to the data centre here. So this yellow hatched area here will broadly identifies the location where the pedestrian and cycle route would be installed by the council's project team. This would then link up to the footway, bus stops, etc. located on the A48. So that is considered to be a merit of the scheme to encourage active travel to the site. So moving on to air quality, an air quality assessment was submitted and reviewed by Environmental Health. This raised no issues. The site is not located within an air quality management area, nor is it within a buffer zone. A condition was requested by Environmental Health to secure details for HGV routes during the construction period to avoid AQMAs. This is suggested to be controlled via conditional discharge. The council's environmental health officer also requested a financial contribution towards the monitoring of air quality within the vicinity of the site. that would have to be, for planning purposes, that would have to be secured by a legal agreement. However, a Section 106 agreement can only be sought when it would be necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms, would be directly related to the development, that would be fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to that development. The site isn't located within an air quality management area or even a buffer zone. The AQA concluded that there would be no significant impact on air quality from this development. Therefore, we didn't pursue any financial contributions towards monitoring, as this didn't seem reasonable or necessary in this instance. So flooding and drainage. So first of all, the site is not located within a flood zone, so there's no flood consequences assessment required. However, owing to the size of the development, it does require sustainable drainage systems. This would be approval, separate approval from the council's SAB body, which is Sustainable Urban Drainage Approval Body. Informal discussions with the SAB officer, a formal application to the approval body has been submitted or was on the process of being submitted by the end of January. We have had informal discussions with the applicant, their side of their drainage consultant, and the council's SAB officer to talk through the principles of the strategy, which includes permeable paving areas, underground attenuation, natural features such as swales, rainwater harvesting for the roof systems, which will be fed back into the manufacturing process, and an attenuation pond for the service area. In principle, the SAB officer confirmed that this all seemed to be fine and didn't anticipate there being any major issues. So overall, we're satisfied that the site layout that we would be approving as part of this permission would be able to accommodate the SAB features. However, we would apply a condition just to secure final details and implementation of the surface water and foul water drainage arrangements. In terms of heritage and archaeology, a desk-based assessment was submitted, reviewed by the Council's Historic Building and Conservation Officer. It was concluded that there'd be no material impact on any setting of any historic assets. CADA were consulted as part of the PAC report and took the same view. In terms of archaeology, there's a sensitive site nearby to the south of the site, but this site has already undergone ground disturbance, and there's not considered to be any remains on site that would be impacted. So Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust have offered no objection to the scheme. So if we just summarise the key considerations, the site is for the reuse of a previously developed land within the urban boundary, which is allocated for employment use in the LDP. This would allow STPS to expand the existing workforce within Newport from 360 staff to 460 staff on occupation of the building, with this phase of development designed to accommodate future growth up to 650 staff. There would be future expansion opportunities onto the adjacent plot, which will be under the ownership of the applicant, and could relocate existing European processes to Newport and create further job opportunities. I must highlight there that that is not something we can really give weight to, but it's just showing there is opportunities for this company to expand further within land that they own adjacent to the site. Highways are generally satisfied with the overall impact on the road network, providing parking is provided in accordance with the relevant standards. Environmental health have raised no issues with air quality or impact on human health or residential amenity. There will be a reduction of vehicular trips between the existing storage site that the company operate from and their main site. So everything would be on one site, wouldn't be any journeys between the two. There would be a £50,000 contribution towards cycle and pedestrian routes serving the development agreed. Impacts on ecological interests, proposed mitigation, compensation and enhancement measures have been proposed. The landscape officer does have concerns regarding visual impact of the proposed development within the immediate area. However, it is considered that submission of further soft landscaping mitigation could be achieved within the site, which will hopefully overcome some of those concerns. And of course, we would consult with the landscape officer when that conditional discharge application comes in. So, as we are awaiting the final response from Natural Resources Wales with regards to the additional ecological information submitted, we are requesting delegated authority is given to the head of regeneration, investment and housing to issue a decision to grant conditions subject to the Section 106 legal agreement and on receipt of a no objection from Natural Resources Wales. we'd also be seeking delegated authority to refuse the application should the legal agreement not be forthcoming and signed within an agreed timescale. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Grant Hawkins. We've got a public speaker on this matter, Mr. Nigel Williams, Spts Technologies Limited. So, Mr. Williams, welcome to the Planning Committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Newport City Council and the Planning Committee for this opportunity to support the planning process. As Grant has covered in his presentation, SPTS designs, manufactures and sells throughout the world some of the high-end technical tools and equipment which supports the semiconductor sector. Simply put, our tools at a microscopic level build up the complex circuitry that makes the modern semiconductor chip. We support the automotive, telephony, computers, IT and all modern industries. SPTS was formed back in 2009. It was the merger of Avisa Technology and STS of Newport. So our pedigree is built over 40 years of trading in Wales. In 2020, SPTS had 380 staff based in Wales, and we are, as Grant summarised, recognised by leading industry experts and the Queen for international trade and innovation. We are an anchor company recognised by Welsh Government and by Newport City Council. SPTS was acquired by KLA Corporation in February of 2019. This capital investment into this new Project Porth development evidences KLA's support of SPTS's continued growth and job creation within the locality. We have seen an average compound aggregated growth rate of 14% year on year since 2010. Our business saw record performances in 2020 despite COVID-19, no furloughs and no government supports. We're highly profitable and we strive to achieve to be a 1 billion business turnover for revenue in Wales by the close of 2026. Project Porth is the only way in which we can realise this planned economic and business growth. Semiconductor and the semiconductor sector is recognised by Welsh Government and by Newport Council. We're an inclusive employer. We're a STEM champion supporting schools and colleges in the region. Our average salary, we're proud to say, is 43,300, and we're recognised by SEMI as the world leading diversity and inclusion employer. 2021 saw our graduate intakes where females for the first time topped male recruitments. We're very proud of that, and that's a trend we're trying to achieve. Our staff is our greatest asset. The need for our staff to feel rewarded and pleased to come to work every day. So in terms of the environmental and landscape design, the need to have welfare and a trim track or a walk-in facility around the site is something we support wholly, and protecting the ecology on the site, which is a key area, and we have tailored and addressed our design to be that point. In conclusion, we're at bursting point at Junction 24 at Ringland Way. This scheme enables us to continue to be a company of excellence, a company of high reward. We export some 93% of our product around the world to over 15 countries, and we provide further technical service agreement supports to some 35 other countries. We have some of the biggest names in IT and technology visiting Wales on a monthly basis, and we take some 1,500 accommodation rooms throughout the county boundaries of Newport for those visiting dignitaries. This scheme allows our staff, and our recruitment levels published, we are accelerating above and beyond those already to date, but our research and development activities that we do in partnership with other organisations in the city of Newport is recognised around the world, and we need to continue that research and development and meet manufacturing outputs. This project will be BREEAM excellent, but also we will respect and support the environmental and ecological measures that Newport feels appropriate to the site. Thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to your decision in due course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Thank you. I could now move to the committee, please. Questions? Councillor Charles Ferris.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Williams, yeah. What will happen to the existing site on Ringland Way, please?
Charles, if I could now, Charles, if I could interrupt, you can't cross-examine the public speaker.
Okay, well, have they intimated what they intend to do with the existing site? Maybe our officer could tell us that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No, we excuse me. We don't have a future plan. What will happen with the site? It is an existing site, an employment site. I would imagine that as the sort of phased development onto the new site is completed, it will become available for other businesses to use within the designated use classes or subject to planning permission if there's a change of use required. I think we'd be quietly confident, given its transport links to the M4, the SDR routes, and the wider area, with the A449, I think it is as well, that it would be a desirable site to come back into a use. But the submission doesn't tell us effectively what will happen with that once they have vacated the site.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Hello, Grant. Question really on the traffic flow for this project. On page 35, the extra generation says 1 to 2%. I'm not sure you got that in front of you. Page 55 of the report, but all I'm interested in really speaking, yeah. All I'm really asking is, with the traffic flow coming out to junction 28 from this project, is it likely to be 7-day operation? Is it shifts for the peak time traffic? The major impact on junction 28 could be quite devastating for that peak time.
Yeah, so the operations of the site, I believe, is I think it's 6 AM till 10 PM. It is the operating hours for the proposal. So there are shifts. The shift patterns I don't actually have to hand, I'm afraid. But they, there is shifts. I refer to it on as 350 members of staff roughly on a shift pattern. So they will be staggered.
If you say this till 10, sorry, 6 till 10, it could be a 6 till 2, 2 till 10 shift pattern. So
you would suggest that's like, yeah, sort of pretty standard, isn't it, of that sort of working hours.
So with the traffic flow from Lloyd's coming out in junction 28 at peak time, so if it is 6 till 2, 2 till 10, it will avoid that most congested period of time.
I mean, I suppose my sort of experience of the area is, you, like most places, you sort of your 8 till 9 is typically your peak, and sort of your 4 to 5, 5 to 6. So yeah. I think, I don't want to speculate, because that's obviously not not what I should be doing, but you would suggest that the operating times proposed and put forward may help with that. But ultimately, we've got a transport assessment which the council's highways officers have reviewed, and are satisfied won't cause any significant impact on traffic flows within the city and within the wider area of the site.
That's lovely. Thank you for your information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor John Guy, then Councillor Yvonne Forsey.
Can I first say to Grant, it's a first-class presentation. You've covered a lot of things there, really. You've had to go into a lot of detail. I see the main considerations, one being the economic development. That's certainly a situation where this is a worldwide event, isn't it? A development, really, and Wales needs something like that in order to progress in all sorts of ways. So that's one thing. Your other consideration, highways, active travel, ecology, landscaping and design, they're all interwoven, a big jigsaw of things there, which I think you've covered in all sorts of ways. All I can say is that, yes, a very, very excellent situation whereby it's going to bring progress for a lot of people and employment in the future. Well done.
Thank you, John. John Guy, Yvonne Forsey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that I warmly welcome this development, and I think we're looking at good quality jobs and technological advancement, which is absolutely excellent. I applaud the company for supporting STEM in schools. I think that's creditable and excellent. Somebody mentioned the word cladding, which of course sets off all sorts of alarm bells these days. I wondered if you can just reassure me on that, please. Open mosaic habitat was mentioned, and I'm afraid I don't quite understand what that means, if I might. And the final point I'd like to make is in support of a condition that is mentioned in the report there, I think at paragraph 5.4, a condition for secure cycles storage. I think we didn't need to make that a condition. It seems to be a little bit of a, just firm up on that recommendation, please.
Yeah, so I'll answer your last point first, Councillor. Basically, what we do have a condition. The condition, I can tell you what it is if you give me a moment to scan through my report. But effectively, what that does is the prior to the occupation of the building, so prior to the first use of the building, I'll try and read it up too. So full details of the secured cycle storage to include elevations, layout, finish, detail and lighting shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The approved details should be fully implemented and made available prior to the first use of the building as approved and maintained thereafter in that state. So effectively what it says, they need to agree the details with us and implement that before the use of the building, and then they have to keep it there and maintain it in a usable state thereafter.
That's lovely. I'm glad that's a firm condition.
That's your first one, and then I'll go back to the cladding. So there is a materials condition, which means that we will get a submission for the final details of the external materials of the building. At the moment, the materials, I suppose they've given us their idea, but as you can imagine, with delivering supply issues, etc., and costings, they may be subject to change. But what we've got at the moment is the administrative block will be made up of powder coated or anodized finished metal sheet cladding, which would give a contemporary appearance. And then that would have also semi-perforated rain screen panels and brise soleil throughout, because obviously it is south facing, so obviously to offer some shade to the offices in those summer months. And then to the rear, we've got finished in a dark grey matte sheeting. Now, the front, if it's metal, that's not going to be as much of a risk. The rear isn't necessarily explicit to the type of material that sheeting might be, but I would suggest, or I would think that with building regulations and building control, they may look at the specific nature of the materials. So cladding obviously is has been an issue, as is quite publicly been made aware. But we wouldn't necessarily, as part of the planning procedures, agree in terms of fire risk, etc. But obviously the applicant would have their own duties, and I believe it may be kind of covered under building control. But ultimately, we would have to assess and approve the final materials of the building before they're put in place.
Okay.
The final point was the open mosaic habitat. So I've been heavily reliant on our ecologists with regards to the ecological surveys and the reports, etc., as the technical consultee. However, effectively, what we've got is on plot 1, we've got a previously developed site that has been effectively left to grow over. So what happens when you sort of when sites eventually grow over hard standings, they do become amenable for sort of invertebrates and other ecological interests to sort of inhabit. So obviously by clearing that and developing, what the open mosaic features will be is trying to replicate an environment that is suitable to those creatures that would have already been, or potentially would have been there on site. So we're effectively trying to compensate, mitigate and enhance what was already there within the design, within the layout of the site's landscaping.
Thank
So
you.
I hope that covers those 3 points adequately,
Yeah.
Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Trevor Watkins, you were indicating?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Grant, clarification on delegated authority given to the head of regeneration, investment and housing. Does that mean that when they get the decision from Natural Resources Wales, the delegated, it would go on the delegated list? Or not?
I may have to double check with legal just on the process of that. I don't think, well, I'm fairly sure it wouldn't go back on the delegated agenda that we have every week because it isn't necessarily a delegated item. Obviously, it's on the committee agenda and that is the recommendation. So I don't think it would go on the delegated list. I'm not sure whether Joanne Evans may be able just to clarify on that or confirm that I'm correct in what I'm saying.
No, it would really be just a ratification by the head of planning if the NRW were happy with it. It wouldn't need to go on any other agenda. It would be a committee decision, but just confirmed by the head.
Okay. So we wouldn't hear any more about the decision that was delegated to regeneration and housing. Okay, the other question is, what is the attenuation pond for?
So if I pull up
because it's on the opposite side of the road.
Yeah. So if I talk, let me just pull up the initial site plan and I'll just discuss this point for you, Councillor. Right, 2 seconds, share my screen again. So can we see that layout plan?
Yeah.
Lovely. So what basically, very broadly, without going into the absolute significant detail, because that would be for SAB, the parking areas here would be permeable paving across here, and there'll be underground attenuation tanks. So the surface water from these hard surfaced areas would drain into the attenuation tanks, and then obviously the flow would be stemmed out. The rainwater from the roof would be proposed into a rainwater harvesting system, and that would be reused back in the manufacturing process. So we'd sustainably use the water within here. Now the service yard would be a non-permeable service which would have drainage which would link to the attenuation pond. So what I've been advised during our meeting by the drainage consultant is this attenuation pond here would take the water, service water from the service yard via an outlet into the pond. It would attenuate, and it would, I believe, I can't see 100% sure, but I think what it will happen is that water will then discharge into a pipe, a surface water drain underneath the highway.
What concerns me is, I say, effluent, which is not supposed to go into the drainage system. How do they actually? I can understand the everything except that bit that the service yard goes into that pond and then it goes into the drainage system. And obviously, we're talking about the service yard. It could be fuel, petrol, anything really.
So I think I don't want to say something that isn't strictly true, so I'm going to be careful what I say. But I understand that reed beds are proposed within the site. Now, I don't know if that's explicitly with regards to the attenuation pond, potentially clean any water. That may not be applicable for the attenuation pond. But what I would say is there is the SAB application, which is separate planning approval, does look at the sustainability of drainage, but not only that, there's certain certain criteria that need to be met. Now, one of them is biodiversity. So I think within the scope of that application, if you're looking at possible filters or things like that, which You typically associate, if you did have a car park, for example, you would have oil interceptors, because anything coming through the drains would intercept the oil prior to it being released. I would suggest that that is something that may be looked at under SAB. Notwithstanding that, we do have a surface water and foul water drainage condition attached. Yeah. So we could require specific details of that if necessary when we are discharging that condition.
I'm happy with the surface water. I was more concerned about the service yard and some of the affluents which this type of company uses is not very pleasant, shall we say. I wondered what that attenuation pond was used for. I'm happy with the rest of it and the company as such. They've been a very good company in Newport for Junction 24, so I'm happy with the application. I'm a bit concerned about that attenuation pond and filtration systems going into the green system, shall we say, and then going out into the river. Okay, thank you very much, Grant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watkins. No one else indicating at the minute. Is somebody prepared to make a recommendation, please?
I'd like to recommend we accept the proposal.
Yeah,
I'll second that,
Chair.
Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded that we accept the officer's recommendation. Are we prepared to vote?
Go ahead with the voting, Chair.
Yes, if you
Yeah, no problem.
can.
Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
Yes, for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
For the officer's recommendation.
Ferris?
For the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Lacey?
For the recommendation.
Councillor Forsey?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For the recommendation.
Yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. That's a unanimous vote for the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we then move on to item 3 on your agenda, pages 64 to 85, application number 21-1040. The site is the Old Oak Stave, Ruskin Avenue, Rogerstone. Board is Rogerstone. Ward members, Councillor Forsey, Evans and Dudley. Presenting officer is Gail Parkhouse. There is a public speaker, Mr. Chris Rabiotti. And if I could ask the presenting officer, Gail, to make a presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Share the screen.
Hang on, Chair. This is where I declare my interest, isn't it?
Yeah, the advice from the legal officer. Do you have to leave, Charles?
Yeah, well, I understand that I'm supposed to switch the machinery off, and I wondered if you take my word for it, I'm just going to move into another room because my abilities to get back on, well, it's pretty chancy. You know, I'm not good at this sort of stuff, so I'd rather leave the machine running, but I won't be in the room. Would that be acceptable?
If you're not in the same room.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna watch the telly for a bit. So, yeah, maybe you could phone me up or something when I've got to come back on. Okay.
Yes, we will,
all of
yeah.
the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Okay, should I start?
Yes, Gail.
Okay, yeah, okay, so this application then is for the demolition of an existing public house and the construction of 21 flats within 3 blocks and associated infrastructure, including car parking. It's part retrospective because demolition has already taken place, and it's also a resubmission of a previous application. And because of that, I will keep the presentation fairly short. We do have a long agenda. And like I said, it's a resubmission of an application that Planning Committee have previously seen and granted back in February 2021.
Oh.
Okay, so the application was at the former Old Oak Stave on Ruskin Avenue in Rogerstone. Like I said, it's for 21 flats and associated infrastructure works, including car parking. So I'll just give you some aerial views of the site just to hopefully jog some memories. Like I said, it was previously occupied by a pub or restaurant, which is now being demolished, as you can see on the slide. You've got Ruskin Avenue running along here, and I'll give you a slightly wider image. So this is the site in here. You've got Ruskin Avenue running along here. You've got Kevin Road to the south here. And then you've got Mount Pleasant Primary School here, and then the residential areas of Mount Pleasant and the wider areas of Rogerstone. And then also, just to mention, you've got the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal running along here. So the reason why this application has come back into us is to propose the emission of 6 affordable housing units from the scheme, which were previously secured through a legal agreement, along with contributions towards leisure and education. The scheme otherwise is unchanged. So the previous consent included the demolition of that former pub. That has now been demolished. I'll show you what it looked like before. And now a more recent photo, and actually footings and foundations have gone even more recently, and the site is a working construction site. So the applicants have lawfully implemented their previous consent, and permission is extant. So that's why I'll keep things fairly brief. It isn't really an opportunity to revisit the issues as such, other than to discuss this emission of the affordable housing. But I will go through fairly briefly the proposal, just to remind you of it. So as before, it's for 21 flats within these 3 apartment blocks, and they were all 2-bedroom flats. Access to the site was to the north here, which is an existing access, or through the car park here, which is also an existing car park. There will be 50 parking spaces throughout the development, including some visitors parking spaces. There's an area of landscaping, existing landscaping, along the boundary of the site that would be retained. There would be landscaping within the car park and along this western boundary, and then within this sort of courtyard area here, which also acts then as sort of communal amenity area for the occupiers of the flats. Bin stores are proposed in this location here and in here, and then each apartment block would have access to secure cycle stores here, here and here. To give you the elevations then of the apartment blocks, they're largely identical, except for a different position of a balcony on one of the blocks. As you see, this is the front elevation here, 2 sides and the rear. As you see, they've got hipped roofs with a gable feature on each end, and then a central dormer windows on the front elevation. The rear elevation's got this rear projection, which provides an access and entry point via a central lobby. So that's the access point for the apartments. And they will be finished in a red brick and render. And I will just show you a computer generated image of the site taken from the southern car park. You'll note that these well, there's 3 houses. You can just see the edge of one house there, 3 houses here. They're separate from the site, but they also have an extant planning permission. Works haven't started on those yet, but it just gives context of what the site would look like with both developments being built out. Okay, so the main considerations then. These were the matters which were considered previously, so highways and access, residential amenity, design, air quality, noise, ecology, landscaping and trees, waste and drainage, all were considered acceptable by planning committee. Other than the discussion about contributions, I'm not going to run through every other issue because, as I said, the scheme is unchanged. Those matters were previously considered acceptable by planning committee, and the applicants can lawfully build out that scheme. It's also worth noting then that there's been no change in LDP policies since that decision, and no new and relevant supplementary planning guidance has been adopted. So the policy framework is exactly the same. So that really then just leaves the issue of the planning contributions and the omission of the affordable housing. Please note the applicant continues to agree to the education and leisure financial contributions, which are around 44,000 for leisure and 38,000 for primary education, which would still be secured through another legal agreement. Okay, so the applicant has stated that the scheme cannot afford to deliver the affordable housing. They've submitted a viability appraisal, which has been reviewed by the planning contributions manager. The overall conclusion of that appraisal was that the applicant would achieve a profit of less than 15% if all the obligations were to be delivered. A developer's profit on open market housing would normally range between 15 and 20%. So with all those contributions, they would be achieving less than what is typically normal. It is a technical assessment, that the viability appraisal. It's largely based on predicted sales, sale prices, and the cost of building, which for smaller, more bespoke developers such as this, it's generally higher, as they don't benefit from economies of scale like a large house builder would do. So economic viability is a material planning consideration when looking at the scope and scale of planning obligations. If an applicant is unable to achieve a reasonable profit, then their purpose for developing a site isn't met. There's an ever-present need for more housing, and it's considered that this site, which is acceptable in all other respects for this site is acceptable in all other respects for residential development. If the applicants are unable to make a reasonable profit, then they may well not deliver the sites, and that delivery of housing would not be brought forward. So as I say, that it is a technical assessment, which the planning contributions manager may be able to help with any questions at the end of this presentation. But when considering all of that, he has advised that the affordable housing obligation could be waived, but the education and leisure obligations remain, and that is our recommendation today. So just to sum up, all matters previously considered acceptable remain still to be considered acceptable, and we consider that the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to reduce the planning obligations requirement, and we recommend that planning permission is granted subject to a legal agreement and the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail Parkhouse. Thank you very much. There's a public speaker now, Mr. Chris Rabiotti. Welcome, Mr. Rabiotti, to our meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
And over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thanks for letting me talk today. I'm a small stroke medium-sized developer with 25 years experience in delivering developments within the South Wales area. In my recent developments, I have a track record of providing affordable housing, and I fully accept the social need for developments to fund this. However, I wanted to explain some background to this application, explain why it can no longer be achieved as part of this development. This scheme commenced over 2 years ago with architects and cost consultants being appointed in November 2019, and we completed the purchase of the site in March 2020, just before the pandemic. As you're aware, I came in front of the committee exactly 12 months ago, and a lot has happened that has had a huge impact on the construction industry. The pandemic has caused material and construction costs to rise to levels never experienced before, and they are showing no signs of reducing. If anything, further increases are likely this year. As a result, we are looking at an increase in the cost for building the scheme in the region of 35%. Whilst there's been an increase in housing prices, there's a ceiling for apartments within the Newport, and this has been confirmed by chartered surveyors and estate agents within the viability report, which was submitted to the council. As detailed in the officer's report, the affordable housing contribution, the scheme falls below the threshold of 15%. This figure is important because lenders have confirmed that they would not be willing to provide the finance needed to deliver the development if it's below 15%. Without this funding, the scheme cannot progress, and I'm unable to deliver the housing that would regenerate the sustainable location and previously developed site. We have currently invested a lot of our own money and time into this scheme and remain committed in delivering a quality development. We have left the education and leisure contribution of just over 82,000 unchanged with this application. Finally, your officers have thoroughly assessed the open book viability assessment and recommend to you that the removal of the affordable housing be accepted to ensure the development can proceed. I ask you to proceed in accordance with their recommendations. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rabioti. Thank you very much. We now move to the committee. Councillor Forsey, you first to speak. It's in your ward.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this reduction is deeply unfair on residents. An agreement has been reached for 6 flats to be given for affordable housing, and that is a huge contribution. If you think of you know, the cost of 6 flats, what will be given for section 106 is probably about 1/10 of what was originally agreed, and so I think this is deeply unfair on residents. Residents are concerned about the additional traffic that this site will provide. Many residents are still concerned about the height of these flats, which I think are too high. It's in amongst 2-storey residential housing, and I think I think these flats should have been capped at that height as well. We say that this was acceptable on planning, deemed acceptable on planning last year. However, the vote was very close. I think the vote was 5-4. There was only 1 vote in it, and some of us who wanted to vote were excluded from voting, and so it was very close and just, you know, narrowly tipped over to acceptable. So I think it's really disappointing that an agreement has been reached, and now it's been reneged upon, and I think that's deeply disappointing for residents, because the contribution does offset the you know, the harm that the development will cause. And finally, I just wanted to ask a less important point, but I wanted to ask where the refuse and recycling lorry will park when it is doing its collections on a Monday morning, please.
I'll call Gail back in, Councillor Forsey, but you are straying into areas of the planning application which is not for discussion today, really. It is the contribution to section 106. Gail, do you wish to come back on the parking of the lorry on any points?
Yeah, I'll just show the layout plan. Hopefully that will help. I don't know whether you can see the writing here, but it does say refuse vehicle collection point. So a refuse vehicle could park temporarily there to collect rubbish from this bin store here, There's also another bin store here as well, so a refuse lorry could come down here and turn, but also collect refuse.
Okay.
I think allowing the refuse lorry to park there on the junction of Ruskin Avenue and Ruskin Avenue, it's just when children are going to school, which is just about 200 metres up the road there, and people are leaving for work, and that's the position of the refuse lorry. Can you see that that is the junction of where Ruskin Avenue goes round in a loop? It's going to jam up the whole estate. So I think the parking, you know, the traffic considerations are difficult, but there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forsey. If I move on then to Councillor Trevor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. One question to the officer. What is the difference in the makeup of bedrooms in this application compared with the previous application? Is it exactly the same? Are they all 2-bedroom or 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 1-bedroom flats, or what are they? Do we know?
The scheme is unchanged. So last time it was proposing 21 2-bed flats, and that is still the case now. So all 2-bedroom flats.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Padneck work quality I've got flashing up. Can you carry on now, Trevor?
No, I'm okay. That's all I wanted to know, Chair.
Okay. Did you catch that, Gail? That question, please.
Yes, she did, and she answered it.
Oh, well, I didn't hear it. Okay, fine.
Okay.
As long as you were satisfied, who am I? Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else indicating they wish to ask the question? Take it back. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Chair, I can hear you.
Loud and clear. Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Like technical problem. Never happened before, but I'm back. Right. Councillor Watkins was the last one with questions. Is there anyone else with a question? No? Is somebody prepared to make a recommendation on this one? Can you hear me now? Oh, Councillor Guy.
Yes, Chair, to move things forward, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation on this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there someone prepared to second that, please?
Yes, John Jones, I will.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Jones. Can we move to the vote then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
I accept the officer's recommendations and conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Accept.
Did you say 4? Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Oh, I cut myself off, I think. Sorry, accept,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Watkins,
For the officers' recommendations.
Councillor Lacey,
For the recommendation.
you, Councillor Forsey,
Against.
Councillor Jones,
For the recommendation.
and finally yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation. Apologies for that disruption.
It's okay, Chair. That's 1 against and 6 for the officer's recommendations.
Okay, can we get which councillor excluded himself? Can we get him back?
It's Councillor Ferris. I'll give him a ring now, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, if we move on then, the next item on the agenda, are you back in, Councillor Ferris?
Hello, Chair, can I inject as well? So I'm going to stand down on this one. So I'll be leaving the committee party now. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You wish to come back, we'll contact you by phone, yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same for me, Chair.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Is Councillor Ferris back?
I've just rang him now, Chair. He should be logging back in again now.
Welcome back, Councillor Ferris. Thank you very much. We now move on then to item 4, which is on pages 86 to 116 of your paperwork. It's application 21-1084. The site is Basic School. The ward is Craig. The ward members are Councillors David Williams and Councillor John Jones. And there is a ward member wishing to speak, Councillor David Williams, and there's a public speaker, Mr. Stephen Harris, who's an agent for LRM Planning. Gail Parkhouse is the presenting officer. So if I move over to you, Gail, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Share the screen. Okay, so this application is at Basleg Comprehensive School, located off Forge Lane, the Griffin in Basleg. It's for demolition of existing buildings and structures, proposed new teaching block, new car parking and drop-off arrangements, flood lighting to a sports pitch, land reprofiling and landscaping. And this is the site here. And I'll just give you a wider aerial view of the site to give some context and for those who are less familiar with the site. So you've got Caerphilly Road, which runs through Basleg and to the north of the site here. That connects then with Basleg roundabout, which is a busy roundabout. So you've got the Risker bypass, which runs along here, and then it runs along Forge Lane all the way to junction 28 of the M4, and here's the M4 here, and then you've got the residential areas of Basleg, Redarian Heights, and then Rogerstone in the wider area. Okay, the school site itself can be described as having kind of 2 main teaching areas. You've got the Forge building here, which is the older part of the school, which is a former grammar school, I believe. It's had multiple extensions and additions in the past. There's a large playing field at the front of the building. There's existing car parking to the north, and then an ad hoc car parking area to the south and also this area here is the existing school bus drop-off and collection point. There's two entrances into the site. This is the main entrance here of Forge Lane, and then there's another entrance here off Court Crescent. This is Court Crescent here. Both are vehicle accesses and are closed during the day, during the school day, for obvious security and safety reasons. Then there's the Griffin building, which is was built around the 1950s or 60s, and a more modern art block in this location here. This is an all-terrain pitch here, and this is a hard play area here. There's also some additional car parking here and here, which is accessed from the Griffin, which runs along here. There's a number of temporary demountable buildings scattered around the site. You can see one here and here, here, and then there's also some demountable buildings here as well. There's a stream that runs through the site. You can just see the direction of it running through here. And then there's the pupil pedestrian entrance point is located here, and you can just see the hard footpath running into the site here. Okay, so as I said, yeah, the application is for demolition of existing buildings, a new teaching block, car parking, floodlighting, land reprofiling and landscaping. The proposals are part of the 21st Century Schools programme. The school is nearing capacity, and the proposed development would allow the school to accommodate the anticipated 287 additional pupils by 2023. There would also be an associated additional 17 staff. It's the second application for Bayside School that committee has seen in the last year. You may remember the first application, which was for new sports pitches, which I'll show you. This is granted by committee in July 2021, and it includes 2 all-weather sports pitches or 2 all-weather third generation or 3G pitches here and here, an improved grassed rugby pitch here, and a multi-use games pitch here. The permission also includes use of this area here and the removal of the mountable building for community use car parking, because there would be community use of the sports pitch, the central sports pitch, which I'm highlighting. So just looking at the various elements then of the proposal and looking at demolition first. So here's a slide to show everything that's proposed to be either demolished or removed. So everything highlighted in red, the circles are trees. So it's proposed to demolish a number of the buildings because they're outdated and they don't provide suitable teaching environments anymore. And it's also proposed to remove the demountable buildings which have been used on a temporary basis. In terms of phasing, this would be the last element of the whole scheme. Like I said, those buildings highlighted in red would be those which would be removed or demolished. This slide is a 3D image, just orientated slightly differently. So this is the Forge building, this is the Griffin building, this is the play new sports pitches here. So I'll just show you some photos, I think, of the buildings which would be demolished to give you some context. So firstly, this building here, this is the Griffin teaching block, which is this building here. You can see it is out of date, or outdated rather. And then here we've got some other buildings and some demountable buildings. The drama block in particular. This is the drama block here, and then this is the demountable building, which is currently sitting on some of those parking spaces at the moment. Looking then at the Forge building, you've got the southern wing here and then the northern wing here. The southern wing provides some classrooms at the moment. The northern wing provides a dining hall. And then there's also the lodge building and a ground staff building. So it's proposed to demolish those. And then these buildings here are demountable buildings, so they would be removed. Here's a look at that, the lodge at the entrance of the site. This is the ground staff building. This is part of the northern dining wing, and these are some of those demountable buildings. Okay, moving on then to the teaching block. Here's a layout plan of the whole site. So I'll just try and zoom in because it is a large plan, it's hard to read. So the new teaching block is proposed to be positioned in this area highlighted pink. It would be positioned centrally within the site, and it would replace that all-terrain pitch which I showed you earlier. It would also include this area here, which is a central plaza, and that would be the front of the building here, so it leads towards the front elevation of the building. And I'll show you a slide of where it would be positioned if you were looking towards the site. So this photo is taken from the pupil entrance point off the Griffin. This is the Griffin building itself. This block here is one of those to be demolished. This is the all-terrain pitch, which is where the new building would be positioned in this location here. And then some elevations of the proposed building. So it would be a 3-storey building finished in brickwork and cladding. There would be extensive glazing throughout, with the front elevation being predominantly glazing, and that would mark the focal entrance point of the building. And I'll give you some graphic computer generated images of that new building here. You can see that this is the front of the building with that extensive glazing, and then this is taken from that new plaza area leading up to the front elevation of the building. Moving on now then to the car parking arrangements. So I'll just take you back to the layout. So new car parking is proposed in this area to the north of the Forge building, and then it's this area here to the south, and then this would be the new bus drop-off and collection point here, but I'll zoom in to all of these areas just to give you the detail. So the first area then to the north of the Forge building, this would provide 147 spaces, including 2 electrical vehicle points, and infrastructure then for a further 8 electrical vehicle points, 7 disabled parking spaces and 8 car sharing spaces. The area to the south of the building would provide 19 spaces. So across the 2 areas, there would be a total of 166 parking spaces. There's a third area of parking within the school site in front of the Forge building, which provides or will provide 42 spaces. These are for community use associated with that central 3G pitch, and they were granted as part of the sports pitch application. They're not part of this application, but I just wanted to show you their position for information purposes. Looking then at the bus drop-off and collection area, this is a section of bus bays which would be lengthened. So at the moment it stops in around about this location. So it's proposed to lengthen it so that more buses can park, and also to include this sort of loop here, which will allow buses to manoeuvre much better and improve safety of pupils. Floodlighting then, 6 floodlighting columns are proposed, which I'll show you on the layout plan again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 floodlighting columns to light up the previously approved 3G pitch. They would be 15 metres high, and they would be, like I said, lighting up that central sports pitch only, which is for community use outside of school hours. So the permitted hours of the sports pitch granted by that previous consent are 5 o'clock till 9, so 5 PM till 9 PM on weekdays, and 9 AM to 5 PM on Saturdays and Sundays. No use on public or bank holidays. And so this slide here, this colourful slide, is taken from some lighting information that they provided to us, just to show the light spill associated with those lighting columns. Next was the land reprofiling. So it's proposed to create 4 areas of earth mounds across the site. 2 would be created in the main sports fields, which are these areas here and here. They both have shallow gradients up to a maximum height of 1 metre above the existing ground level. The other area would be taken, in the playing field in front of the forge building. This area here has already got some variance in the ground level, so the height ranges from 1 metre up to 2 metres in height of those earth mounds. And then the other earth mounds would be at the south end of that playing field, and they would have a maximum height of 1 metre. Looking lastly then at landscaping, it's proposed to remove a limited number of trees to facilitate the proposal. Replacement tree planting is proposed at a ratio of 2:1 for those lost. There's a small stream crossing the site, which I mentioned, and it's proposed to create some swales, a new grassed area and tree planting adjacent to this. There would also be some landscaping within the northern car park, and then new tree planting along the bus drop-off and collection area. 2 new outdoor social spaces would be created for pupils. You've got that plaza area, which I mentioned, so there'll be landscaping and tree planting within that area. And then also with the demolition of the southern wing of the forge building in this location here, that would be opened up to a social or a hard social area really for pupils, but also including some landscaping opportunities too. Just to mention some other associated works, it's proposed to create a link to a future cycle path or a shared use path to connect to Court Crescent, which I will show you on the layout plan if I can zoom in. Oops. Sorry, I'm getting there. Right, okay, it's not great quality this, but there's a grey area here, which is a connection to a future shared use path, which would connect to Court Crescent. So And the idea is that would create opportunities for pupils to access the site as a pedestrian or on bicycles. The bin stores are also proposed in this area here. You can see them highlighted in pink, along with a bike shelter in this area here, a further bike shelter in this location here, and then there will be some cycle hoops in this location and adjacent to the 3D pitch. So 40 bike spaces within shelters and 23 cycle loops. Where the eastern wing of the Griffin block teaching block would be demolished, it's proposed to regrade that land and seed it with a wildfire mix with some tree planting to enhance the outdoor provision for pupils. Okay, so in terms of assessment then, and in terms of publicity first, we consulted all properties within 100 metres of the application site, which picked up 170 addresses. We also put up a site notice and a press advert, and we consulted the local community council. We received 5 representations from neighbours and an extensive response from the community council. Those responses were all set out in the report. So the main considerations have been the principle of development, highways and active travel, air quality, residential amenity, design, landscaping and trees, ecology and protected species, drainage, flooding, water quality, archaeology and heritage. So just looking at those issues in turn. The principle of development then. So the purpose of the application is to provide updated and new facilities in order to address the deficiencies in outdated buildings and to accommodate a projected capacity of 2,050 pupils. Like I said, which is an additional 287 pupils to the current school capacity. If this additional capacity is not met by the school, then new pupils will have to be transported to other schools across the city. And as the proposal would be in connection with an existing school, which is located within the urban boundary, the provision of additional and replacement facilities to support this use is considered acceptable in principle. Looking then at highways and active travel, the assessment concerning highways and active travel can be split into 3 main matters. The impact of the proposed development on the highway network, the amount of parking and provision of school transport, and the active travel improvements. So looking firstly then at the impact on the local highway network, a transport statement was submitted with the application. It uses data from the TRICS trip rate database in order to understand the school's existing travel patterns. This data was used rather than real-time data, as the pandemic has impacted how schools normally operate. For example, there might be less pupils in school or less teachers, and there's different use really of how public transport has been used during the pandemic. So the highways officer is satisfied that this database data collection has been used. So using this database, the transport statement concludes that there are an existing 310 trips in the morning peak and 190 trips in the afternoon peak. When considering the additional pupils and the staff associated with the proposals and using the same data calculations, the transport statement finds that there will be an additional 263 trips made by people in the morning peak and 308 trips in the afternoon peak. Not all of these trips would be made by vehicles, however. The transport statement notes that 48% of these trips will be made by pedestrians, so pupils walking to school. 23% made by public transport, using the school buses. 5% by bike, and some 24% of the trips would be made by car, and that's split with 20% being the driver and 4% being a passenger. All of this combined has resulted in the forecast of an additional 51 vehicle movements in the morning and 31 vehicle movements in the afternoon. So that's 51 car trips and 31 car trips in the afternoon. So it's considered that this increase in vehicle movements is unlikely to have a significant impact on conditions experienced on the surrounding network. And highway officers agree with the conclusions of the transport statement and have no objection. Looking at car parking and the school drop-off area then, the existing staff and pupils generate a demand for 119 spaces. Pupil parking demand is calculated on an estimate of pupils of driving age. So there are a limited number of pupils bringing vehicles to the site. The site currently has 125 spaces across the site, and the proposals would see an increase in staffing numbers by 17, and this generates a demand for just 15 additional spaces. It's proposed to provide 166 spaces, which significantly exceeds the parking requirements set out in the Parking Standards SPG. And on this basis, the Highways Officer has no objection. Now, it's noted from neighbours and the Community Council that there are existing problems with sixth form students parking in neighbouring streets. This proposal would not increase the sixth form pupil numbers. There's a separate statutory process for increasing admission to year 12. And this is not a proposition forming part of these proposals. So as such, the proposals would not lead to a worsening of the situations which currently exist. And we've queried with the applicant whether any improvements could be made to sixth form parking provision regardless of this. But we've been advised that many pupils choose not to park within the site itself because the gates are locked during the day for safety and security reasons. And as sixth form pupils, they're not always in school during the entire day, they come and go. This means that they would be locked into the site. So instead, they choose to park in neighbouring streets. And I think this causes some concerns for neighbours. However, the applicant does note that providing they park legally, they're not actually doing anything wrong. And it's really for the school to educate pupils about being considerate to their neighbours. So, but in a nutshell, this proposal wouldn't increase any sixth form pupil numbers, so wouldn't have an impact on that existing situation. As mentioned, the proposals include an improved and extended bus loop, which would allow additional buses to drop off and collect pupils. In line with the school transport policy, all pupils who live more than 3 miles from the school are entitled to free school transport. The Highways Officer is satisfied with the arrangement of that extended bus loop. Then looking at active travel, as I mentioned, cycle parking is proposed at 3 locations across the site. Either in a cycle shelter or as a bus loop, as a cycle loop. And the proposals include that link to the future shared use path connecting to Court Crescent, which is a scheme which is being worked on by the active travel team. And providing this link would ensure the use of more sustainable modes of transport are encouraged. moving on then to air quality. There is an air quality management area along Caerphilly Road. As you can see, it's this area outlined in red to the north of the site. This was declared in July 2018 due to exceedances in the annual nitrogen dioxide objective. The main causes of poor air quality are industrial and road traffic emissions. So an air quality assessment has been submitted with the application, and as there would be an increase in pupil and staff numbers, there would be obviously an increase in vehicle movements, which we've already talked about, including construction vehicles during the construction phase. So the air quality assessment can be summarised into the following bullet points. So these are the conclusions it has made. The background pollutant concentrations within the application site itself are well below the objectives set out in the air quality regulations. So air quality within the site itself is good. There would be HGV construction vehicles during the construction phase, but these would be temporary, and the air quality assessment concludes that there'd be no lasting effects on local air quality. Because the number of vehicles expected to be generated by the proposed development and which would travel along Caerphilly Road are below the threshold for a more detailed air quality assessment, and this is a threshold set out by the Environmental Protection UK and the Institute of Air Quality Management Guidance. Because of this, the impact is considered not to be significant enough on local air quality to warrant any further assessment. The development itself would be positioned well away from busy roads, where background pollutant levels are below the objectives. And as I said, so pupils would have acceptable air quality. And notwithstanding the fact that the impact on air quality would be acceptable, the proposal includes some mitigation as best practice, and this includes the provision of electrical vehicle charging points, the provision of a travel plan to encourage sustainable travel, pedestrian and cycle access to the site, and the promotion of sustainable travel in the school curriculum. Now, while the Council Scientific Officer hasn't commented on air quality, we are satisfied with the air quality assessment produced by professionals in their field, and overall we are satisfied that air quality would not be adversely affected. Looking then at residential amenity, there are a number of properties which share or are close to the boundaries of the school. The main part of the proposal, the teaching block, would be located centrally within the school grounds and well away from those neighbouring properties, and as such we do not consider this to cause any harm to privacy, no loss of light or overbearing impacts. The proposals include those flood lighting columns, that is those 6 columns lighting the central 3D pitch. Lighting information has been submitted with the application, and the Environmental Health Officer for the Council has advised us that they have no objection, subject to a condition which requires lighting levels to not exceed levels set out in industry standard guidance. So they're satisfied that residential amenity would be protected. It's also worth noting that the sports pitches are not permitted to be used beyond those hours I mentioned before, so beyond 9 PM on a weekday or 5 PM on the weekend. So on that basis, we're satisfied that residential amenity would be protected. And then I also mentioned the creation of those earth mounds. So we've looked at those and considering the impact on the neighbouring properties closest to them. The earth mounds which are proposed in the front sports field are well away from residential properties, and there are other features within the intervening distance, such as roads and boundary treatments, and we're satisfied that residential amenity would be protected in those areas. There would be 2 earth mounds in those main playing fields I mentioned, and they would have slightly closer relationships with neighbouring properties on Caerphilly Road, so properties here, off a cluster of flats known as St Benedict Court, and some houses here called Birch Trees. In both cases though, the earth mounds would have a gentle slope up to a plateau of about 1 metre above the current ground level, and those plateaus would be located well away from neighbouring boundaries, in the region of around 20 metres. So we consider that with this distance and this relatively modest increase in height, that the mounds are not going to result in a loss of privacy to those neighbours. There have been concerns about noise generated during the construction phase, and it is recognised, like all construction projects, there would be some disruption to normal conditions for those who live closest. However, this disruption would be temporary, and a construction environmental management plan has been submitted, which sets out how disruption would be minimised. And the environmental health officer and the highways officer is satisfied with this document, which would be included in the approved documents condition. Looking then at design, the teaching block would have a contemporary design and appearance, which we consider to display good design quality. The building would be located well within the grounds of the school, and its scale and massing would not be dissimilar to existing buildings within the complex. And it's considered it would not be visually harmful in the street scene and the surrounding area. And it's also considered that modernising the school to some extent would be a positive impact, with the demolition of tired and deteriorating buildings, and also the removal of those ad hoc demountable units. So overall, we consider the visual impact to be acceptable. Looking at landscaping and trees, the proposals include the loss of a number of trees around the periphery of the site, but around 80 new trees would be planted. Trees within the site which are of significance and value would be protected, and the Council's tree officer is satisfied with this, subject to some conditions to ensure tree protection measures are agreed and implemented. The landscaping officer has made some recommendations about planting to soften up the appearance of the bin stores. However, we consider their design to be both necessarily functional and acceptable, so we don't consider any further landscaping as necessary there. We're also satisfied that no additional planting beyond that which is proposed is necessary. We do not consider that the proposed development will result in any harmful impacts on neighbouring properties, so additional planting isn't required to mitigate this. And overall, the landscaping proposals are considered acceptable, subject to conditions which require a maintenance and management plan and tree planting pit details. Looking at ecology, an ecological impact assessment has been submitted, and it identifies there will be a small number of ecological impacts as a result of the proposals. These include a loss of habitat, indirect construction impacts, and lighting changes when the building's operational. And it also recommended that further survey work for badgers and bats was carried out. So that survey work has been carried out. The badger survey didn't identify any evidence of badgers on the site, and the assessment of bats in trees, an assessment of bats in trees and a bat survey of buildings was also undertaken. The bats in trees assessment identified some precautionary mitigation measures which the ecology officer is satisfied with, and these can be secured through a condition. The bat survey of buildings does identify a potential bat roost in one of the buildings to be demolished. However, the ecology officer is satisfied that acceptable mitigation, compensation and enhancement measures have been identified, and a condition is recommended to secure those. And Natural Resources Wales are also satisfied with the impact on bats, and they recommend that the applicant is alerted to the need for a licence, a bat licence, and will alert the applicant through an informative. Other mitigation and enhancement measures are identified in the ecological impact assessment, and the ecology officer is satisfied with these, recommending conditions to secure them. Just looking briefly at drainage, a foul drainage connection is considered acceptable by Welsh Water. And in terms of surface water runoff and any localised flooding issues, these would be dealt with through the Sustainable Drainage Approval Mechanism, SAB, which is obviously separate to the planning process. And in terms of water quality, Natural Resources Wales, I mentioned water quality because of that stream running through the site. Natural Resources Wales are satisfied that the submitted construction environmental management plan contains suitable measures to protect water quality in the stream which runs through the site. And then lastly, just looking at archaeology and heritage, because part of the site is within the essential setting of Tregear House. An archaeological and heritage assessment has been submitted with the application. CADU have reviewed this assessment and are satisfied that the proposals would not have any impact on historic assets. And the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust also advised that it's unlikely that significant archaeological remains would be encountered during the course of the development, and they have no objections to the proposals. So to sum up, we are satisfied that the proposed development is acceptable and would not result in harmful impacts on highway safety, residential amenity, visual amenity, air quality, heritage assets and ecology. And we are recommending that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail Parkhouse. Thank you very much. We have a public speaker on this item, Mr. Stephen Harris, who is the agent for LRM Planning. Welcome, Mr. Harris, to the Newport City Council Planning Committee.
Sorry, Chair, we're just shuffling seats between speakers here.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so
okay.
Welcome to you, Mr. Harris. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. My name is Stefan Harris of LRM Planning, and I am the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant for this proposed development. The officer's already given you a detailed presentation alongside her comprehensive report as to why this application should be approved. So I intend to cover some of the key planning considerations and touch upon some of the other relevant factors. As mentioned, members will recall receiving an application for playing pitches at Baseleg School, which was heard at committee last July. The proposed new teaching block would have been part of that same application, but ecological survey seasons conspired against us submitting them as one application at the time. Accordingly, though, this project has been a long time in the offing and is therefore a robust and well considered proposal. The application before you is for a new school building within the grounds of an established school site, complementing and expanding upon the existing accommodation and allowing an increase in the school capacity. Newly generated school places will be filled by pupils from local primary schools. The new teaching block will replace existing demountable structures and outdated teaching facilities, negating the need for any further demountable structures over the coming years. Therefore, given the siting of the building within the school grounds, the principle of development is firmly established. To provide some background to the proposals, the application is submitted as part of an upgrade to the school's existing facilities, as it is currently near to capacity. There's an anticipated increase in demand for up to 300 additional places in the near future as a result of the various recent residential developments in the site vicinity. The new teaching block is designed by local architects in conjunction with staff and pupils at the school, as well as the Education Authority, with consideration of the most minute details in order to provide the best facility possible. The design is modern and attractive, making the most of the opportunity to provide a positive learning environment for pupils. I'll move on to addressing some of the objection comments raised, of which there are only a handful, as follows. In respect of highways, the application has no objection from the Highways Officer. The site is in a sustainable location, and sustainable methods of travel to the school are both available and encouraged. In addition, sufficient new cycle and car parking spaces, including spaces for electric vehicles, are provided. The accompanying transport statement has concluded that there would be no material impact on highways conditions. On a related note, we provided a detailed construction environmental management plan, also known as a KEMP, with our application. This provides a summary of the key considerations of the impacts of the construction process. The KEMP was discussed during the application process for the sports pitches on the school site, though since then the applicant has appointed a contractor who provided their own KEMP that supplements this application. This was submitted with the main application, and the planning officer and consultees to the process have listed it as an approved document should members support this application. The KEMP was written after extensive consultation with the authority, such that its contents address a number of matters known to be of local concern. Its support from officers should therefore address any local concerns that members may have been advised of. To cover various other matters, beginning with ecology, the surveys that delayed initial submission of this application have since been undertaken to the satisfaction of the Council's ecologist and Natural Resources Wales. Ecological mitigation is proposed in the form of bat and bird boxes, which the school can no doubt use as a learning tool for its pupils. Impact of lighting from the pitches has been assessed by our consultant and accepted by the Council's Environmental Health Officer, with a condition imposed to limit light levels. Issues of noise and air quality have already been covered by the officer, against which we have no objections. Some other matters have been raised by objectors that are either not material planning considerations or that relate solely to the sport pitches, which of course, as already mentioned, already have planning permission. The officer will no doubt be able to clarify some of these points. To conclude, the application before you will have tangible benefits to the school by modernising its facilities, improving education opportunities for the children of Newport, and halting the need to keep addressing increased capacity demands by the installation of demountable structures. The new teaching block is an attractive building and an exciting prospect for both future and current Baselig pupils. All relevant technical issues have been addressed and the proposal accords with both local and national policy. The officer's report offers a balanced assessment that's been reached after careful consideration. We would therefore respectfully encourage members to follow the officer's recommendation and grant approval for this development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Thank you. Have you got to change seats with Councillor Williams now?
I have, yes, if you bear with us.
Thank you.
Just the cameras went on. No. Yeah. Okay, they'll switch. Okay. Yeah.
You were there. You were there as large as life, and we can see you. So it's Councillor David Williams. I've got you. You can. You're a school governor, so you can leave the meeting after you've spoken.
Yes, thank you, John. Prynawn da everyone. I'm actually the chair of governors of Baselig School, as well as being a governor. With a little bit of background, I've lived in Baselig now for 50 years in April, and whilst I didn't attend this school, my siblings have, my siblings' children, etc., all attend the school. So in your bundle, you will notice the submission from the Community Council. This sums up the views of many residents, and I think I'd be right in saying that the majority of the community welcome this development. The school is tired, is a not quite the way of describing it, and we welcome the new proposals, exciting new proposals to develop the school. So in the bundle, I'd like to draw your attention to just some of the salient points. The council would like to say that in principle it does support this upgrade of the school, but feels that many of the issues need to be addressed. I understand the planning officer has gone through it already, but I do need to draw your attention to it. So we've got the first issue, which is parking issues within the vicinity of the school. This has been a massive issue for many years. I think that the school has attempted to address it. Residents have attempted to address it, but it's something that needs to be addressed by the council as well as by this planning application today. The increased volume of traffic at the start and end of the school day and general traffic management safety concerns about Basilisk roundabout following the recent upgrade. If any of you have, I'm not sure whether any of you councillors do live within the vicinity of Basilisk, but the roundabout as it is at the moment can be extremely dangerous at times, because as you proceed towards Caerphilly, there are only 3 parking spaces in front of the lights. So we would like to ensure that that is also addressed as well. The possible solutions are obviously indicated in the bundle that you've had. The new layout of the lay-by outside or in front of the school, it cannot accommodate the amount of school traffic being generated, as mentioned, because it is always littered with vehicles, people's parking there. The bus is supposed to be able to go through there to access the bus stop in front of the school, but at picking up and dropping off times you can't do it. There's just too many vehicles there. The impact of proposed flood lighting on residences adjacent to the school. So obviously we're concerned about that. I understand that is being addressed through the application, because as we know, any light pollution will greatly affect everyone. Air pollution. All the issues with traffic management as mentioned above have led to areas of Basilisk having very high pollution rates. We've already had the discussion of the area along Caerphilly Road, and the council would like to ensure that this is addressed. Noise pollution, I understand, is being addressed through the construction statement, and we welcome that. And we hope that during the course of this build, if planning permission is granted, then we will be able to do it with the minimum inconvenience to residents there. Litter around the school, and although I understand that litter isn't a planning objection as such, I think there's much needs to be done within the application to ensure that the site is that the new development is made as litter free as possible. And the other, perhaps the final point, is it's been extremely difficult during COVID to have what would be termed a worthwhile public consultation. I understand that letters were sent to residences directly bordering the application site, but in the normal course of events prior to the pandemic, we would not have we would have had a public meeting at which many of these issues could have been discussed, and I think many residences' fears allayed at an earlier stage. So whatever can be done, whatever the decision is today, whatever can be done to improve the communication to residences in our village needs to be done. So thank you for listening to me today. We haven't got much longer left now, and I hope that you'll take on board all the points that I've made, both orally and in the bundle that was submitted by the Community Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you very much. Thank you. Could we now move to the committee, please? Questions? Councillor John Guy. Councillor John Guy.
Sorry about that, didn't have my mic on.
No problem.
Okay, can I say that I've read all the information on that's been put forward, and another good presentation, and listened to the speakers afterwards. Basic school, like a lot of schools in Newport, sort of started or originated back in the 20th century, and it's from that time there's been all sorts of bits and pieces added. The main concern from my point of view is the fact that, as been said by Councillor Williams, the roundabout and the dropping off point. I see that the dropping off point is going to be extended. Anything else as to the roundabout, it is chaos there sometimes, but generally speaking, the what is offered the basic school is something to, you know, to bring it up to the new state of the art and everything else. And so there we are. There are some things that be considered outside the planning application for all sorts of reasons, as described by the various speakers. But can I say that it's a first-class application, and I commend it.
Okay. Well, is anyone prepared to second that? If that's a proposal, please.
Second it, Chair.
Okay, can I then move on? We'll come back to the vote in a minute. Councillor Trevor Watkins, you wish to speak, Trevor?
Yes, please, Chair. Just one question. It was mentioned there's a stream running through the development. Is this tidal at all? And how is it controlled?
I think it's just a very much a local watercourse, very small, not affected by tides. I imagine it's a small tributary of the River Ever, but I couldn't say that with absolute confidence. But yeah, certainly Natural Resources Wales haven't raised it as a flooding issue.
Okay. That's what I was concerned about, Gail, that's all. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Chair.
Chair, you haven't got your mic on.
Yeah, okay, I'm back with you now. If there are no other questions, it's been proposed and seconded. We accept officer's recommendation. Can we move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
Yes, I accept the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Clark.
Was that Councillor Clark, sorry?
Yes, please.
I didn't hear. Yeah, yeah, 4.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
For the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Ferris.
For the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Forsey.
For.
Thank you. And finally yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous vote for the officer's recommendations.
Okay. Pamela, could you invite the two councillors back into the meeting, please?
Yes, of course, no problem.
Or we move to the next item. Okay. Okay, the next item on your agenda is item 5, pages 117 to 119. It's application number 21-1185. The site is Market Gardens Allotments, East Grove Road, Newport. The ward is Alway. The ward members are Councillor John Guy, Councillor Deb Harvey and Councillor Ray Truman. There are no public speakers. The presenting officer is Joanne Davidson.
Chair.
Councillor Guy.
Yeah, can I just say that I just wanted to see if you can have a word with Joanne. As you've already said, it's in my ward. I haven't been canvassed in any way. I've not sort of come to any conclusion beforehand. So I don't know whether you're happy for me to be staying with this, but I'm completely neutral on this. I've not made my mind up.
Okay.
Chair, as long as Councillor Guy hasn't made his mind up, that's fine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I have to declare an interest because I know a number of families who are on the plots on the Lady Hill site.
Okay. Can I have a ruling on that, Joanne, please?
Well, it would only be if you had a particular relationship with somebody, a close personal association with somebody, if you felt the public would see that as prejudicing your opinions.
I do have a close relationship, unfortunately.
Right. Then perhaps best if you sit this one out then.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. You're sitting this one out.
Yes.
I must remember to call you back in. Okay then. Joanne Davidson, the officer presenting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. I'll make this as brief as I possibly can, Chair. So the application is for a collapsible shipping container on Lady Hill allotments for tools and horticultural sundries. It's here because it's our land and for no other reason. The allotments are located within the land edged blue on this plan, so they are extensive and amongst existing residential development. As you can see again on this aerial photograph. Collapsible shipping container. The word collapsible has been used in this context because it'll actually come in as a flat pack which they'll assemble on site. So not the usual shipping container I think of, which comes in as a box. So this is a flat pack which looks like a shipping container that they'll put up on site. It's about 6.5 meters long, 3 meters wide, 2 meters deep. So quite modest, bearing in mind the size of the allotments that I showed you just now. There's the footprint of it there with the exact measurements. That's just an overall summary really of our assessment on this. I'm not regarding this as particularly controversial, to be honest with you. We do have an objection pointing to it potentially being an eyesore. We did consult over 40 property addresses on this application that adjoin the site, but as I say, we've had one objection. There are no other buildings to speak of on the allotment site, although the actual site of the shed itself, sorry, the container itself, did previously have some sort of shed on it, which has subsequently been demolished. But these photos show you, or helpfully show you, that this is situated well within the site, well away from adjoining boundaries with residential properties, and whilst neighbouring residential properties will see it, they'll see it for what it is, i.e. a relatively modest, in this context anyway, storage container for implements, etc., associated with the running of the allotments. We have recommended a condition, limiting it to approximately 5 years, because this is a temporary building after all, but it will give the allotment holders and council plenty of time to consider a more permanent construction if this facility is required. And that's it really, Chair. That's our recommendation, granted with conditions. If I need to go back to any slides for any reason, in trying to make it brief, if I've skipped over anything, please let me know. But that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Joanne Davidson. Thank you. Sorry. Over to councillors. Any questions, please? Councillor Guy.
Yeah, can I just say in general terms, and not specifically this, but obviously on the planning, that allotments were introduced sort of after the First World War, the Second World War, to make people self-sustainable. And from the point of view of environmental and people getting involved in these things, it's really good. That particular development is well managed. It's a real focus of people getting themselves involved in that, and from the point of view of physical and mental situation, it's very good. So it's a first-class situation. As I say, I'm just making my judgment on the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Is someone on committee prepared to make a recommendation? There's no other hands up. No.
Recommend we accept the officer's proposal.
Second that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
Yeah, I accept the recommendations of the officers and for it.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Accept.
Councillor Ferris,
For the recommendation.
Councillor Lacey,
For the recommendation.
thank you. Councillor Forsey,
For.
Councillor Jones,
Yes, for.
thank you. And finally yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Okay, much obliged. Could you call Councillor Watkins back into the meeting, please?
No problem.
Thank you. Okay. We then move to the final item on today's agenda, which is item number 6, pages 120 to 125 of your paperwork. It's application number 21-0955. Site is 108 Kypurlin Road. The ward is the Gare. Ward members are Councillor Deb Wilcox, Whitcott and Marshall. And the presenting officer is Stephen Williams. So over to you, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just share the screen. Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the application relates to number 108 Kypurlin Road in the Gare. It's a semi-detached two-storey dwelling situated on the east side of Kypurlin Road, and it's situated in a run of semi-detached dwellings with allotments to the rear of the site. It's proposed to demolish a garage and construct a two-storey side and rear extension to the north side of the property. And the application has been reported to committee because a councillor is a neighbour to the property. So these are the existing floor plans. So it's, as you can see, it's a 3-bedroom dwelling with a lean-to single-storey extension at the back. And these are the existing elevations. And these are the proposed floor layouts. So you can see on the left side the extension. As I say, it's a 2-storey extension. On the north side, it's flush at ground floor with the front elevation of the existing property, but set back at first floor by 0.75 metres, and then it extends to the rear of the rearmost part of the existing 2-storey part of the property, and it extends back by 3.2 metres in depth, and it's set off the site boundary by 0.75 metres. And these are the elevations. As you can see from the front there, it's a hipped roof extension with sort of a hipped 2-storey at the back there. So just run through some photos. So the application property is the one that's painted sort of a yellow colour, and to the left is number 110, which is located to the north of the site, and number 106 is located to the south. That's just a view of number 110. A close-up of the application property, and you'll notice that number 110 is situated at a slightly higher ground level than the application property, probably about 400 millimetres high. That's just looking down the side of number 110. You see this window here, which is serving a study in this property, so that's a habitable room. The other windows are not habitable. They serve storage areas or kitchens, but this is a habitable room window that faces directly towards where the extension is going. And that's looking from the back. So you can see a previous single story that's been built. And the extension will be built here. And you can see 110 in the background there. This is the garage that would be demolished. And that's just looking up the driveway to the existing drive area. So the main issues are three issues really: visual impact, impact on neighbours, and parking. First of all, in terms of visual impact, the street scene has a rhythm of solids and voids in the street scene. So you've got semi-detached properties with these spacing between them, and the council's supplementary planning guidance on house extensions requires that side extensions be set back by at least 1 metre from the original front elevation, to try and ensure that the extension is subordinate to the host building, and to reduce that visual impact of the extensions of impacting upon this rhythm of solids and voids. Now, the proposed extension would not be set back by that full metre. If you recall, I explained that it would be flush at ground floor and set back by 0.75 metres at first floor. So that's not the full metre that we'd be looking for. So we consider that the extension would unduly close this gap and adversely affect the character of the road. It will also impact upon symmetry with the adjoining semi-detached property, albeit that we recognise that the symmetry has already been disrupted to some extent due to the construction of a gable on the side of that property there. So in terms of assessing the impact on neighbours, so first of all, looking at number 110 Caerphilling Road, which is the property to the north. So here's the application property and garage to be demolished, and the extension is being constructed on this side of the property here. And in terms of, I say, it comes out by about 3 metres to this point here approximately. And you notice that this property has had a single-storey extension constructed, and this is just a secondary window serving a kitchen. It has a much larger window on the back there. So we're not concerned about the impact on this extension or on the rear window here, because it simply doesn't extend past it. And the nearest window on this property here that would be next to the extension is just serves a bathroom, not a habitable room. So we're not concerned about the impact on that window there. But what we are concerned about is the impact on this window here, which is a habitable room, and it's the only window that serves a downstairs study, which we consider to be habitable. Effectively, it's a study, could be a bedroom. But it's a room that the occupier of that property would spend a lot of time in. That's just looking in the other direction. As you can see, the extension is going to be in this area here. So in terms of looking at the impact on that study window, we've got to look at our daylight tests, and you will probably recall there are 2 of those tests. First of all, you've got your vertical test, which you take a 45-degree splay from 2 metres above the window, and you can see that this splay is interrupted by the proposed extension. It only clips it, but nevertheless it does fail. And then looking at the bird's eye view, you can see that clearly a 45-degree splay will be disrupted by the proposed extension. So in terms of the daylight tests, both tests fail, and the supplementary planning guidance says that in those circumstances an application should not be supported. These are photographs taken from inside that property and looking out of that study window. So you can see that the extension would be constructed to the side of this wall here, and it would be located about 2.25 metres from the window. So we are concerned that that would have an overbearing impact and cause loss of light to this property, and to this room in particular. A few more photos to show the impact there. In terms of looking at the impact on the property to the south, number 106, which is the adjoining semi-detached property. So you can see that's the application property, and this is the extension here. And this is the layout of the of number 106. Again, looking at those two daylight tests, the horizontal or the bird's eye view look at it, you can see that it passes. This does not disrupt that line. And in the vertical, again, this is the extension, and the daylight test in the vertical isn't disrupted either. This extension obviously extends past this rear building line, but it's to the north of this property, and they're both at the same level. So we're not concerned about the impact on this property. We have had objections from the occupier, objections on grounds of overbearing impact and loss of light. But having considered those factors, we don't feel that the impact on number 106 would be unacceptable. Finally, in terms of parking, so we are seeing the loss of some driveway and a garage. They have laid out the front forecourt in block paving, and they're proposing to slightly widen the driveway. And highways are happy with this arrangement. They're saying that it's no different to having 3 parking spaces in tandem, and this would enable 3 cars to be parked off the property. So highways have got no objection to the application. So in summary, we are recommending that permission be refused for 2 reasons. One, the visual impact on the street scene and the adverse impact on the character of the street scene due to the closure of the void between the 2 properties. And secondly, the adverse impact on the study of number 110 Caerphillican Road and the impact on the amenities of the occupiers of that property. And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Committee? John Jones, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Stephen.
Hi.
Looking on your report and your presentation, it's very interesting to see these type of style houses and how they are set out, and the space between the houses is very strong character. I believe in what you're saying, it would have a detrimental effect on 1110, and for that reason, I'm pretty much against the idea. I'm supporting your application to refuse it. So I honestly think most of those houses, they either get extensions on the back or they get extensions in the roof, and that's more, and a small single extensions at the back perhaps. I think, really speaking, the character of the house though, it would really reverse the character of the house and the spacing. So I really do feel that it shouldn't go ahead, but that's my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other committee member, please?
Chair, I'll second if that was a proposal by Councillor Jones.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it's my proposal. If somebody can second it, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been proposed that we accept the officer's recommendation, which is refusal. That's been seconded. Yvonne, you've indicated you wish to speak.
I just was going to propose we accepted the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. No one else is indicating they wish to speak. Can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Guy, can I have your vote, please?
Yeah, I accept the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, accept.
Councillor Watkins?
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ferris?
Support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Lacey?
I'm for the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Forsey?
Accept officer's recommendation.
Councillor Jones?
For the recommendation.
And finally yourself, please, Chair.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous for the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 5 on your agenda is appeals decisions. That's just for noting. I'd like to thank all the officers for their input today, and I'd like to thank all the committee for attending. And with that, I'll close this meeting of Newport City Council Planning Committee. Thank you very much.
Great.